hordes and sail the seas, because Hoenn is here, baby! While in the real world, lions may eat antelope, in the Pokemon world, we have 4-armed metal mechs called Metagross that will pin prey to the ground and eat them bite by bite. So that begs the question, what is the ecosystem in Hoenn like? Scouring route after route, from spelunking through caves to sailing the sea and even climbing towers, I've done my research to bring to you the most detailed and realistic explanation of Hoenn's complete ecosystem. Hi there, I'm Krillic, and let's set some ground rules. I will be obtaining my information from the original Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald games, since Horace kinda has Pokemon from future generations. I mean, there's literally a Zora in the first 2 routes. And I want the purest forms of these ecosystems within Hoenn. We will travel through Hoenn route by route, visiting landmarks along the way, and with each Pokemon, I will explain their Pokédex info, what they're based on, and how they eat and affect the environment and each other, while excluding humans from the mix as much as possible. We will only be covering naturally occurring wild Pokemon within the region. As such, some Pokemon will be excluded. Sorry, Melodic, you don't naturally appear until Generation 5, so see ya in the next installment. When it comes to Pokemon such as those found in rocks or the water, the level that they are encountered must be within the level range of the Pokemon naturally found in the grass, or we will not consider them part of the natural ecosystem, as it would also skew the results, ruining the ecosystem or our analysis of it itself. For example, a super rod gives a 100% chance of Corphish at levels 20 to 45, while a good or old rod gives Corphish, Goldeen, and Magikarp. This could be explained by the weight of the lure, but it generally overcomplicates things, so we have the level rule set in place. Funnily, if there are any repeat Pokemon from previous editions, such as those from Johto or Kanto, then I will simply repeat any vital information that is needed about them before explaining how they fit into this ecosystem, rather than giving you a full synopsis of their character, behavior, and what food they ate last night. So without further ado, let's start with some of the history, environment, and climate of Hoenn. With the brief history, we know Primo Kyogre and Primo Groudon filled the sea and created land until they met with each other, having to be stopped from battling or they would destroy the world that they actually ended up creating together, but separate. They go night-night at the bottom of the ocean as they try to regain primal energy and transform, but at the same time, the red and blue orbs are created to prevent these transformations from occurring. Then, 2,000 years prior to the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire games, the region is plagued by meteor showers, overflowing the lands with energy and reawakening Kyogre and Groudon. The Draconids pray, wishing for salvation, and Rayquaza arrives to save the day again. Then, 1,000 years later, it happens all over again! Except the reason it happened this time is because of one big meteor. And then, of course, we have the events that happen in the modern day of Ruby and Sapphire alongside the eventual Delta episode. This region just loves getting smashed by meteors. When we look at the environment, though, we get the following. The Hoenn region is a group of islands that boasts many dramatic environments, from rainforests to deserts. But its most striking feature is its abundance of water, a strong contrast to other core series regions, especially Sinnoh. Much of the region is covered in water, almost equal in size to the mainland, exemplifying the theme of the games. There are several large and populated islands off the mainland only accessible via water routes, many of which are deep enough for diving. Much of the interior area is forested or mountainous, so most notable cities are found on the coastline. People who live in towns and villages and mountain areas must adapt to the harsh environment. An extreme example of this is the inhabitants of Four Tree City, who live in tree houses, like literal tree houses. This is in stark contrast to other regions in the Pokemon world, as noted by Ruby in Pokemon Adventures manga, who prefer Johto's many modernized cities to the wilderness and countryside in Hoenn. Why do I now imagine every single individual in Hoenn to be a country bumpkin talking in that get sweet, real hot southern drawl? My voice. Hoenn has one active volcano, Mount Chimney, in the northwest of the region. I point it this way That's your northeast, probably. This is my northwest. Mirrored. There we go. The ash from Mount Chimney regularly falls on the nearby towns and routes. On the opposite side of the Hoenn region lies the Volcanic or Impact Crater, depending on which version of the games you play, in which Sootopolis City was built in. It's pretty much the Impact Crater by modern day standards. Unless it's, alternate timelines, which we know exist in the Pokemon world. Some of Hoenn's newly discovered Pokemon strongly reflect the influence of the primarily tropical environments. Speaking of climate, Hoenn seems to have a warmer climate than other regions, similar to an equatorial climate close to the equator. This may mean that Hoenn is located closer to the equator than the other regions. The mainland experiences a wide variety of weather across its breadth. Ashes constantly fall around Mount Chimney in the northwest, constant extreme sandstorms afflict the arid desert near its center, frequent rain falls on the mainland's northeastern areas, nourishing the rainforests and long grasses that grow there. So we have quite the array of environments here, and that's not unheard of. It really depends on precipitation levels that then determine everything else when you're that close to the equator and it's so warm. With all of that background information out of the way though, this video will be structured as follows. Day and night are gone from this generation, so we don't have that separation like we do in Johto. I will talk about the routes, then name Pokemon we see on it, describe them and their diet. And on certain routes, after covering all the Pokemon naturally living in them, I'll paint a nice little picture with my words to bring it all together cohesively. If I quote other sources than Bulbapedia for our audio-only audience, I shall drop into an accent of sorts to try and keep it relatively consistent. So with all of that explained, let's start moving through Hoenn, starting with Route 101. This grassy path running between Little Root Town and Oldale Town is perfect for doing field work. Here we start fresh with brand new Pokemon on a brand new route, starting with a little silkworm Pokemon called Wurmple. It has suction pads at the tips of its feet which allow it to cling to glass or tree branches without slipping. It can spit white silk that turns gooey when exposed to the air. To defend itself, it can release poison from its tail spikes, which can weaken foes, and its diet consists of leaves and sap, the latter of which it gets by pulling bark off of trees. Wurmple are abundant and live in forests. It is unknown why they evolve into either Silcoon or Cascoon, and not even Wurmple's appearance gives a hint to which species it will evolve into. And Tailo, Swellow, and Starly are natural predators of Wurmple. So Wurmple's poison is not actually necessarily deadly, but you still don't want to get stung by it as it will weaken you. We find this as a common thing between many of our early form bug type Pokemon. It's supposed to be a way of defense and deterring their foes without killing them. Also, it is true, there is only a just full-on flip of the coin 50-50 shot whether Wurmple evolves into Cascoon or Silcoon. Also, as a small tangent, when you flip a coin, the side that is facing up actually has a 51% chance. So, you've been lied to all of your life. Though I do wonder if, because we don't have temperature actually within the games themselves, if there is a chance that there's a temperature range in which Wurmple turns into Silcoon or Cascoon, similar to that of what we would see in turtles. And yes, if you don't know that, depending on the temperature of which the egg is incubated, it will determine whether the turtle is male or female. That's why global warming and the warming of the planet going up and up and up is producing more female turtles, but there are no males, meaning that they can't have babies. Again, though, it is really hard to say whether that is a possibility because we don't have temperature in the games, but it is a reasonable conclusion or possibility considering Dustox is usually associated with the night where it's colder and Beautifly with the day where it's warmer. Moving on though, its diet is real nice and easy. It is a worm after all, and they make up about half the population in this route. Up next is our little badger raccoon in striped pajamas as we have Zigzagoon. Zigzagoon is abundantly curious as it wanders restlessly back and forth while rubbing its nose to the ground in search of something. It always moves in a zigzag fashion and leaves behind distinct zigzag footprints as it runs. It rubs its bristly back hair against trees to mark its territory and plays dead to fool opponents in battle. The Zigzagoon found outside of Galar are friendlier and calmer compared to their Galarian relatives. Zigzagoon are capable of finding items in the grass or ground, they have the ability pickup after all, including items that were lost. It is found commonly in grassy fields. Fun fact, by the way, I am from Florida, and they do teach you to do a zigzag movement if you are ever chased by an alligator. It's the way to get away from them. What do you want? Back to Zigzagoon though, and while we are talking about our Hoenn variant, we might want to look at our regional one, because in fact, our Galarian Zigzagoon existed and is the ancestor of our Hoenn friend here. So let's read up on the description of the more badger-like variants of our Pokemon. Much like the Zigzagoon found outside of Galar, Galarian Zigzagoon are known to be constantly on the move and never settling down. It is believed that Galarian Zigzagoon's restless temperament is what originated the zigzag movements observed on both forms of this species. Their known habitat stretches the entirety of Galar, being found in fields, forests, and towns. They enjoy battling to the point where they often attempt to provoke others into fighting them. While this succeeded with other Pokemon, humans instead tend to mistake this as wanting affection, much to the Zigzagoon's frustrations. So, we as humans heard its screams of wanting to murder us, slamming into us, coming at us full bore, just punching our knee like a child, and picked it up and went, "Oh, such a cute baby," and decided that we would coddle them against their will and make them pets. Eventually, it kind of just gave up and said, "Fine, I guess." Mainly because I get free food from you, as long as I don't actually hurt you. Unfortunately though, this still does not tell us about their diet. So, I mean, yeah, we have their temperaments. Let's look at Lanoon for guidance. How about we do that? Lanoon can run up to 60 miles per hour, but it can only run in a straight line, and has to stop before it can make a turn. Because of this behavior, it often fails to catch prey and struggles on roads that are curving or winding. When it sees prey underwater in ponds, it leaps in and uses its razor-sharp claws to catch and take it down. So there we go. We actually have confirmation now what it eats, or at least that it hunts for prey, as since we can safely assume that Lanoon hunts prey, at least in the water, most likely on land as well, that Zigzagoon would be similar in this fashion. This is not the case for all Pokemon, which I am sure we will come across later on. This information can all be reinforced further using real-life information, as raccoons will be opportunistic omnivores, and badgers, according to the Minnesota DNR, primarily feed on mice, ground squirrels, and gophers. In fact, the badger is the only predator that can dig out the deep, burrowing pocket gopher. Badgers also eat snails, grasshoppers, bird eggs, honey, insect larvae, and snakes. This means that our Zigzagoon is most definitely eating other Pokemon, including poor Wurmple, amongst many others, while supplementing itself on berries and anything else that it finds. After all, it does again have that pickup ability. Also, I kind of have to compare our Hoenn Zigzagoon to our Galarian Zigzagoon here with real-life raccoons, because I learned something about a month ago and I can't shut up about it. It's this whole idea that raccoons in cities are adapting to become a quote-unquote different species altogether, as most animals are what they call neophobic, meaning that they are going to be afraid of new things. You don't take risks. You stick to the rivers and waterfalls, or whatever the song says that you're used to, right? The rivers and lakes that you're used to. That's what animals do. You do that, that's where you get your water, that's where you get your food, and you try not to die. It's as simple as that. Though, the modern and more actually aptly city raccoon is becoming neophilic, meaning that they are attracted to new things. They're willing to take more risks. This is something that has adapted over the years about basically being around humans. And what do we see with our Galarian Zigzagoon versus our Zigzagoon itself? We see a tanuki raccoon thing that has gone from very wild, wanting to fight everything, usually behaviors that are attributed to those that might be afraid or find that it is a prey species and needs to fight back, to becoming a creature that is a little bit friendlier, seen as a pet, and at least humans try to be around it more and more and more, creating a quote-unquote new species, when in fact they can still mate and everything like that, so that kind of takes away the whole new species idea. It still gives you the idea of a transformation. Back to our main topic though, as despite all these zigzags from our zigzagoon here, it might still be in trouble from a funny little pooch that is in this area, Poochiana. Also, it's not even an actual dog, and you probably know this already, even though it has pooch in its name. Poochiana, or rather hyenas, are not members of the dog or cat family. They are in fact part of their own family, but are more closely related to cats if you really want to be ever so slightly specific and go there, okay? Poochiana have a very keen sense of smell, allowing them to find and chase their prey with ease. It takes a bite at anything that moves and makes the hair on its tail bristle out to try to intimidate foes. Poochiana's vigorous barking attempt at opponents embodies Poochiana's cowardly nature. Known for its tenacious nature, it chases after prey alongside the pack until the victim becomes exhausted. If its victim strikes back, then it may turn tail. It is omnivorous and will eat anything. This Pokemon lives in grasslands, savannas, and forests. Beautifully said. I love when the descriptions like that are nice and easy, though according to San Diego Zoo, hyenas are generally nocturnal, but they can be active during both day and night depending on their needs and if people are around, basically disturbing how they function. Though, let's learn a little bit more about hyenas because they give my dear Ed back here, right there, just a bad reputation, and I think he deserves so much more, as even I know very little about this species itself. From National Geographic. The most successful hunter in all of Africa is intelligent and loving, forming intricate social bonds that rival those of primates. Cubs of the alpha female inherit the rank immediately below hers, similar to monarchy. The king of the jungle, you might say? Nope, we're talking about the hyena. Long misunderstood as dim-witted, the hyena has a serious PR crisis on its paws, says Arjundia, a PhD student at the Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research in Germany, who studies spotted hyenas in Tanzania's wow, that's a whole... No, I'm not saying that one. Ngorongoro crater. There we go, I figured it out. The visceral reaction anytime I tell someone I'm working with hyenas is, ew, gross, why? That's because centuries of literature and traditional folklore, often featuring stories of witchcraft, grave digging, and sexual deviance, have cemented a deep-rooted disgust for the hyena in the human psyche, he says. Aristotle described the hyena as exceedingly fond of putrefied flesh. Hemingway labeled the animal a hermaphroditic, self-eating devourer of the dead, and Roosevelt called it a singular mixture of abject cowardice and utmost ferocity. According to a 1995 study on the hyena's status throughout history, Pliny the Elder, an ancient Roman author, wrote that hyenas can magically freeze other animals in place. Imagine that, an animal that's existing in real life that just, like, it's a cockatrice then. It's literally a cockatrice, a Medusa of sorts, some sort of Gorgon, as it just stares you dead in the eyes and you're gone. Those spotted hyenas of East and Southern Africa are the most commonly maligned. The four species are often lumped together as one. The brown hyena, the rarest species, is native to southern Africa. Oddwolves are monogamous insect eaters found in East and Southern Africa. And striped hyenas, the smallest and least studied species, live in fragmented populations across Asia and Northern Africa. Mostly it's fear and lack of understanding of these hyenas, coupled with their unusual appearance and scavenging tendencies, that have spawned so many negative stereotypes, says Deer. But, he says, it's time to set the record straight. To stop they aren't stupid. These apex predators are critical to controlling prey populations and preventing the spread of disease, particularly by eating every last bit of animal, Deer says. Spotted and brown hyenas live in tight-knit clans that are led by an alpha, often a female, and include lower-ranking females, males, and young. Clan size depends mostly on prey availability, ranging from 10 members in some desert-dwelling clans to around 120 animals at the resource-rich Ngorongoro and Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve, Dia says. I am messing up words, but you know what, bear with me. Such large and complicated groups make spotted hyenas the most socially complex carnivores in the world, dear ads. So when we look at these social bonds, they are something that unintelligent creatures cannot muster. I mean, look at the people you don't want to be near. I feel, personally, an eternal rage every single time someone genuinely believes in the flat earth theory. If I offend anybody that believes in the flat earth theory, good. You should be smarter. You should have been born smarter. Like, I am known to be a very incredibly patient and determined individual. So, again, I say now, there is no way that I could actually associate with a person like that. Because that's being willfully ignorant. And if I'm ever wrong one day, I'm already dead, so I don't care. Though, in reality, it's less about that and more about having the intelligence to understand one another, to seek out the underlying issue and come up with solutions appropriate for the individuals involved so you don't just rip each other apart. After all, you can't just be an actual menace to your own group of people. Otherwise, everything's gonna fall apart. Hyenas also only laugh when they're upset or stressed, and it's usually on the lower ranking ones of the groups that do that. So like, the literal runts of the litter will whine and laugh out of stress just like any other animal will because they're afraid, they don't know. Which that ties back into our Poochyena, the lower ranking, the young. Hyenas are excellent hunters whose spoils are more likely to be stolen by lions than the other way around. In the Serengeti in the 1970s, zoologist Hans Crook found that when spotted hyenas and lions share a carcass, hyenas were responsible for the kill 53% of the time. Spotted hyenas can take down buffalo and baby elephants, hunting alone or in groups. There's nothing funny about a hyena taking down a baby elephant. Why did I laugh? There's something wrong with me. A flexibility that gives them an advantage over their competitors, Dia says. They're strong, have high endurance, great lungs and hearts, and don't even actually smell bad. Though, hyenas do produce a substance from their anal gland that scientists have nicknamed hyena butter. I keep it far away from my dinner table, please. It's a paste used to mark their territories. It smells like mulch, Dia says, which, again, very common amongst many animals marking their territory. They are also not hermaphrodites, despite their appearance that I will not show on video here. And finally, one last important note, because I know we went on for a while, that I didn't know about. That makes me very sad when I think about my dear Mightyena Ed. Because of habitat loss and widespread hunting, striped and brown hyenas are classified as near threatened by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the body that sets the conservation status of species. And as I did look it up, since the article I have read from was from 2019, they are still currently near threatened, meaning they are close to qualified as endangered, vulnerable, or critically endangered, which would be followed up by near extinction. If you want to help, go visit the African Wildlife Foundation website and donate. There are many animals in this world that are in need. Actually, something I would love to do in the future, because I've done 2 charities in the past, is to pick a wildlife fund and donate towards them as part of a charity at some point. I do so much ecology stuff, I feel like it's fitting. Fully back to Pokemon though, this route is nice and easy as Wurmple are wriggling around during the day, partying hard until some Zigzagoon comes in and one of the party-goers just disappears in the blink of an eye. Zigzagoon then runs off happily with their prey, but the commotion has attracted the attention of Poochyena, who was originally asleep, now aware of more fresh prey. It dashes after the Zigzagoon, who it chases until it cannot run anymore, allowing Poochyena to have a great meal. Just a small picture compared to the much larger ones we will get later. And before we continue, as always, I want to say thank you so much for watching. If you want to support deep research like this that revives the world of Pokemon and teaches you about the real world in an interesting way, then subscribe. Let others know about the channel, watch other videos, and even become a member for as little as $3 a month, as it goes a very long way. I currently do all the editing and the art, with exception to a few pieces, such as my intro and outro screens, or most of my emotes, and I commission artists for all that real good stuff, as they're credited in video descriptions. So a lot of this goes back into the channel. So, with that then, back to the video. Route 102. Many trainers gather on this route in the hope of encountering Pokemon in the wild. Things are already going to get a little bit crazy as we get 3 new additions alongside Poochyena, Zigzagoon, and Wurmple that are here. Starting with the rarest encounter and the only place we find this Pokemon, Ralts. Ralts uses the horns on its head to read people and Pokemon's emotions. Warm feelings cause its body to warm as well, but it hides if it senses hostility. Keep note of that for later. If its trainer is in a cheerful mood, Ralts is also cheerful and joyous. It is known to inhabit urban areas, but it does not normally show itself to humans. However, when it senses happy feelings, it will approach people. Ralts prefers to hang out with people of cheerful nature more than those with gloomy natures. Regardless, Ralts will show no discrimination to anyone based on age or gender. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, when you see a Ralts smiling in its sleep, that means something good has happened during that day. Gotta admit, very cute. It's also a child, so of course it's gonna smile in its sleep after a good day. It's childlike. I will also add in that we are between 2 urban settings, arguably the closest to if we don't count Route 101. So Ralts is likely waltzing in from Petalburg areas. So here's the kicker though, because we have our first Pokemon that does not inherently describe its diet at all in any forms. But we do get one piece of incredibly vital information. When it senses happy feelings, it approaches people, and warm feelings causes its body to become warm as well. We can scientifically break this down as potentially an exothermic reaction. Ralts takes in a food source, and its body warms up as it works to process it into tangible energy that it can release. That food source being emotion. Cheerful emotions. Not much different than you and me when it comes to regular food or any other animal for that matter. Meaning, Ralts is a bit of an anomaly here if we were to take the species as an individual within this route. A creature that only appears randomly and is just wandering through since it likes urban areas where it can get its meals the best without being disturbed. Though, there must have been something that attracted it to this area. And there is. We have one friendly little guy that will one day become a dancing furry platypus, Maracas Akimbo, as we have our next happy entry of a Pokemon, Lotad. The head leaf is a natural dirt repellent. The leaf can stay clean even after transporting Pokemon covered in mud. However, the leaf will wilt if Lotad becomes dehydrated. Its size and weight prevent Lotad from living on land, but on rare occasions it travels on land in search of clean water. Lotad is known to gather in lakes of good water quality. The lake surfaces are occasionally covered in Lotad leaves. So as long as this Pokemon has some clean water, it is happy and it is even very sociable creature, meaning that it would make sense how Ralts would find its way here. It is also known as the water weed Pokemon, so let's look at its Pokedex info and 2 pieces of origin to break down what Lotad likely dines on. Lotad lives in ponds and lakes where they float on the surface. It grows weak if its broadleaf dies. On rare occasions, this Pokemon travels on land in search of clean water. So, we also get something else that's a little fun here. Lotad is said to have dwelled on land before. However, this Pokemon is thought to have returned to water because the leaf on its head grew large and heavy. It now lives by floating atop the water. So we have actual evolution, like legitimate evolution, not metamorphosis, like Pokemon likes to say evolution is. No, actual evolution here, as Lotad developed a larger leaf to depend on it for its energy. This basically forms together to tell us Lotad simply performs photosynthesis, at least as a major form of energy or intake. It does have a water lily on its back after all, just without the flowering part. If you really want to look at its Kappa inspirations, Kappa are omnivorous, ranging between cucumbers and human entrails. I don't think Lotad is eating human anytime soon. Finally, it does kind of look like a platypus, but it's not based on that fun little animal, so we don't get to consider those origins here. I just wanted to mention it because I know somebody would probably ask. Worst case scenario though, Lotad's just a funny little guy that photosynthesizes and maybe does a little bit of filter feeding or berry eating as supplemental nutrition. We do get one more grass type here, falling from the sky above when the mighty oak shakes, Seedot. The stem is used to hang from tree branches in its forest home. While hanging, this Pokemon absorbs moisture and nutrients from the tree until it becomes too heavy and falls to the ground. The more it drinks, the glossier its body becomes. Additionally, Seedot polishes itself with its leaves once daily. If it remains still, it can be mistaken for a nut and startles others by moving suddenly. It also uses this strategy to be taken by bird Pokemon to expand on its habitat. Pidgey is a natural predator of Seedot. So, yes, there are a lot of... So let's actually talk about... Let's take a tangent. Peppers. Peppers are only spicy to, like, everything else. I'm not even going to go down that line of what they are and aren't spicy to, but what we know they aren't spicy to are birds. The capsaicin that is found does not affect birds. The reason for this is that your pepper wants to spread leaves. It wants to be eaten. The whole idea of being fit for survival is living, mating, dying. That's it. Everything else is irrelevant. You don't want to live so long that you start taking resources from the rest of your species and you are unable to mate. I'm looking at you, frogs. Yes, frogs can live like between 5 and 22 years depending on the frog. It's ridiculous. Anywho, what happens is the bird will then eat the pepper, take in the seeds, and then when they poop, they drop the seeds off wherever the poop lands, in which case it expands on the territory of that plant, spreading them out and allowing them to grow in new lands, thereby ensuring, hopefully, that with enough seeds around all the areas, it ensures this species' survival naturally. That is basically what's happening with our Seedot here. It's not trying to hide itself. It's actively glossing itself up, yassifying itself. I'm too old for this. And I'm gonna be 26 when this comes out, probably. But either way, it is actively making like a show of itself so that way it gets eaten or gets taken away. I do like how it states that it can be mistaken for a nut, as if that's not what it is. I mean, I guess you could just say it's a weird cocoon thing that eventually expands, kind of like how Bagon turns into Shogun and then kind of unfolds into Salamence. Really brings up a lot of questions here regarding Seedot. Though this funny little nut here is very similar to types of fungus that will feed off of the roots of trees or other plants for that matter. Some have a symbiotic relationship, others don't, but ultimately they can span for miles underground and connect trees from all over, which is crazy to me. So let's take a quick tangent. There have been stories of trees actively helping each other when in need, attaching to each other underground via their roots, if they are of the same family, sometimes even if they're not of the same family, feeding each other nutrients and growing together. It's like they're holding hands underground, and I think that's kind of cute in a weird way. If you want to know more about plants, grass-type Pokemon, and plant sentience, my next video will be covering every single grass-type Pokemon and plant sentience. So keep those peepers peeled, and let's get back to the main topic. To finish this route, we do have one of the cutest little water striders in all of existence. Surskit. On top of its head is a yellow cap with a single antenna that secretes a thick, sugary syrup or a sweet scent. Has anybody milked a Surskit? Do not milk the bug. The syrup is exuded as a defense mechanism, while the scent can attract prey. This Pokemon can also secrete oil from the tips of its feet, which enables it to walk on water as though skating. Surskit inhabits ponds, rivers, and similar wetlands where it feeds on microscopic aquatic organisms. It also is known to appear in puddles after rainstorms. In its natural habitat, Surskit has been known to compete with Dewpider over food. Now, hold your horses for a second, because that is not the first time that microscopic aquatic organisms have been mentioned in the Pokemon world. In fact, the last time we heard about microscopic aquatic organisms was when Starmie blitzes its way through the water and feeds on them through just spinning through the water and coming in contact with them. So this isn't some sort of mistake. This is an intentional thing that has happened multiple times now. This brings out so many additional questions, as we know very little to nothing about the microscopic organisms other than Pokerus, which are living organisms and not just a virus. What's kind of dark though is that it competes with Dewpider over food. Do you know what dewpider eats? Let's take a quick peek at Gen 6 to find out as we look at the diving bell spider, the one and only real-life spider that we know of that spends its entire life underwater. I quote from animaldiversity.org. Argyroneta aquatica is a carnivorous animal with a diet differing upon location, but typically including water fleas, aquatic isopods such as Asalus aquaticus, oh no, wimpod! Insect larvae, fairy shrimp, and even other water spiders. While males tend to be active hunters, females are sessile, that's a new word, ambush predators. The difference here, though, is that many of our insect Pokemon are much larger, so they can feed on much larger creatures. This still begs the question, though, what is Surskit eating? Because it does attract prey. Yes, it could be attracting the microscopic organisms to it, but let's look at water striders, according to Missouri Department of Conservation, which Surskit is based off of, for their diet. As predators, they eat other insects alive or dead. Since they live on the surface, they often eat land insects and spiders that accidentally fall into the water and struggle helplessly on the surface. Water striders detect their ripples, sometimes several striders surround the unfortunate insect and share their meal. So there's a very, very good chance that Surskit is eating other bug Pokemon. To add in, though, Zigzagoon may try to eat Surskit from time to time, and there's a very low chance it would eat Lotad. It's kind of difficult. It seems like a lot of effort for a little bit of energy, so the two, Lotad and Surskit, may be better off as friends. So let's just try and paint a little bit of a picture here. As Surskit, we're going to sit down and say is a carnivore. We get the classic interactions between Poochyena, Zigzagoon, and Wurmple. Lotad floats on the surface of the water, taking Zigzagoon across the water from time to time, or even saving it from the water after it charged headlong into it, chasing a Wurmple and missing. These Lotad keep the water clean to some degree as they float about, absorbing nutrients from sunlight and water, filtering it out a bit, and staying off of land where it can't move fast and where the Wurmple may try to feast on its sombrero. Ralts may also occasionally visit Lotad and cross the water, simply looking for a sweet ride with a friend. Knowing it can't reach the Lotads, though, Wurmple bides its time, waiting for one of the Seedot to drop from above. Maybe it could crack them open if it's lucky and get plenty of nutrients, ignoring its usual diet in times of need. The Seedot eventually becomes too heavy to hold on to the mighty oak and falls down, realizing the fate that awaits. But it decides it is too good to be eaten, leans into the fall, and crashes into the Wurmple, bouncing away as Wurmple recovers from the new concussion. Seedot continues to waddle as fast as it can, and upon reaching the water, it is safe once more. But the Wurmple now sits at water's edge, unaware of what strides its way. A fate it now is too slow to escape, as Surskit glides across the water and snatches up the silkworm from the shoreline, dragging it away as its coveted meal. Route 103. On weekends and holidays, fishing enthusiasts flock to every section of coastline on this seaside route. Poochyena and Zigzagoon are back as expected, with only one other addition in small numbers. Taking a break from the skies above and the salty seas, we have Wingull. Wingull has hollow bones, which makes it light enough to fly. By extending its wings, it can catch updrafts and glide across the sky. Wingull folds its wings only when it is resting. It builds its nests on steep cliffs by the sea and habitually hides prey and valuables in various locations using its beak, especially during winter season. Wingull's main predators are Talonflame, which attacks and catches them with powerful kicks, and Barraskewda, which leaps out and bites any Wingull flying too close to the water's surface. It circles above oceans looking for its favorite food, Wishy-Washy, to eat. It also loves to eat Finneon, who jump up on the sea's surface. Fishermen use Wingull's skill to locate areas teeming with fish Pokemon. Fortunately and unfortunately for Wingull, all those Pokemon are not here, but there are plenty of other fish available for it in the water. Too bad they aren't really available to us at this exact juncture. I'll at least let you know, though, that Tentacool and Magikarp are the closest to being within our level range for our rules, so you aren't missing much since we did already cover them in the Kanto edition. Also, birds having hollow bones is correct, but there is so much more to it, and it is really weird in the end. So, let's take a tangent and explain it, because my brain hurt the first time that I learned about it, and I'm about to hurt yours just a tiny bit. Thank you, Discovery. I've been watching your green and blue planets constantly lately, and I'm so happy, but let's quote from them now. Bird bones aren't just hollow, they're pneumatized. That is, they're full of spaces for air. You have some pneumatized bones too, mostly around your sinuses. According to Matt Wadle of the University of California, Berkeley, as a baby bird grows, the air sacs that make up its lungs invade its bones, forming a bunch of tiny hollows. The air sacs stay attached to these hollows for a bird's life. This, along with a forward and backward arrangement of air sacs, helps give birds a little-known superpower. They can take in oxygen while both inhaling and exhaling. So yes, when they breathe in and they breathe out, their body is actually taking in the oxygen and using it every single time. Unlike us, where we are breathing in and we are intaking oxygen to process, and then we are breathing out carbon dioxide. And as we think about diet, let's be real, we all know seagulls will eat whatever they can get their beaks on, even if it isn't necessarily good for them. But why don't we just wipe away the choice of ignorance and actually learn about their true diet for a moment? According to Bird Spies Online, gulls are omnivores and will eat fish, eggs, insects, mollusks, and even small mammals. Even pigeons. Oh my gosh. The sea rat bird eats the city rat bird. They will consume pretty much anything, including human refuse. That's gross. That's really gross. But at least this route was nice and easy to get through. The next one doesn't really count, as we have Altering Cave. This island has been known by this name since the distant past. No one to date knows where it got its name, however. It only exists in Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald, and naturally only includes Zubat and Event Pokemon. So it is out of the running, especially as we have already talked about Zubat in previous editions. Route 104. This path, rich with water and colorful plant life, runs north and south of Petalburg Woods. Poochyena, Zigzagoon, Wurmple, Wingull, and 2 new additions, one to the skies and one to the water. We do have Marill here, who is established as a predator, though it prefers to eat seafood. The one in the skies would be the swallow Pokemon Taillow. Before we get into Taillow, though, let me share with you the first time I actually saw swallow nests, which is what these birds are based off of. I went into so I was doing some water research when I was in an internship, and walking through between reeds and everything else, we would go down, bring out our equipment, test the waters, collect some water to bring back to the lab for testing of phosphorus, ammonia, more and more. And I looked over, and again, it was like a overpass in which the water was going under. And it was a long one, very dark in the middle, and would have very little to no disturbance outside of cars going over it because it was a county highway. While looking into this tunnel, I saw what looked like they're just like orbs with holes cut into them attached to the ceiling of this tunnel. And I was so incredibly confused until I noticed a swallow come out of these nests. And let me tell you, anytime we got near the water, they would all come out. So the entire time we were testing the water, we would have, I don't know, 50? It's impossible to count. Maybe more. Swallows circling above us. They wouldn't ever swoop and attack or anything, but still, it was insane to look and be like, oh, that's their nest. Back to Taillow, though. Taillow is very gutsy and will stand up to powerful opponents without backing down. During the cold season, this Pokemon will fly over 180 miles, 300 kilometers, per day to search for areas that have warm climates. It typically hunts Wurmple, but flocks have also been shown eating crops in the Pokemon Chronicles episode We're No Angels. When it is hungry, it will weaken and cry loudly. It is a baby bird. So bugs and crops, meaning it will likely go after grass-type Pokemon, but would it go after Seeduds? The answer would assumably be no, as swallows do not eat acorns. In fact, according to the Audubon Field Guide, swallows feed on a wide variety of flying insects, especially flies, including houseflies and horseflies, beetles, wasps, wild bees, winged ants, and true bugs. It also eats some moths, damselflies, grasshoppers, and other insects, and a few spiders and snails. they can be a little aggressive, so we can also assume that Talo and Swallow may nest as true swallows do and not be bothered by the Wingles. There are no new real relationships here, though I wouldn't be surprised by Marill being eaten by a Poochyena, Zigzagoon, and the occasional desperate Wingle, though that last one is a very rare occurrence. It is a mouse, but it's a pretty big mouse. I'm recording this part well after I actually finished recording everything for this episode and realizing that I somehow missed Petalburg Woods, only because I thought to myself, hey, isn't it weird that I didn't get to talk about Cascoon or Suicune at any point? And so here we are. Here in Petalburg Woods, we find Zigzagoon, Wurmple, Talo, and 4 whole Pokemon. First up on the chopping block, we have Suicune and Cascoon. Dew and rainwater collect on the silk of Suicune, which provides it with nourishment. Suicune lives in forests where it conserves energy by moving as little as possible. This energy, which it had gathered as a Wurmple, serves as fuel for its further evolution. Due to its cocoon, Suicune cannot extend its limbs and can only move really slowly. However, its eyes allow it to be on the lookout for danger. Whereas with Cascoon, the soft silk hardens into a tough cocoon that is able to endure attacks, and Cascoon will not move even when it is attacked. However, it never forgets the pain it endures and seeks revenge upon evolution. It lives in forests where it hides underneath large leaves and inside the gaps of tree branches. Additionally, it camouflages itself by attaching dead leaves to its body. As its cells create energy for evolution, the inside of the cocoon becomes hot. Cracks start to form in its casing when evolution is near. Cascoon silk is said to be thin yet strong, with a luster and texture superior to the silk from its counterpart Suicune. Cascoon silk is also used to make high-quality clothing. Both simply don't really eat. Sure, water may bring nourishment. That doesn't necessarily mean it's actually going for nutrients. I don't know how maybe it's absorbing it through its body for Suicune. Maybe Cascoon has a similar situation even though it doesn't state it. But either way, they are not hunting. They are not predators, they are prey. They are cocoons. Talo and Zigzagoon are going to be the ones taking advantage of that. I gotta admit though, the whole bitterness and desire for vengeance is actually pretty funny and kinda cool when it comes to Cascoon. To follow them though, we do have Shroomish. When it senses danger, it shakes its body and scatters toxic spores from the top of its head. These spores can make trees and weeds wilt and cause whole body pain if inhaled. Shroomish lives in tropical forests, and during the day it hides under fallen leaves in the shade. It eats composted soil in forests, which is made up of fallen, rotten leaves. So it gets to have its home and eat it too, to some capacity at least. It is a mushroom after all. Now, we finally have a detritivore in Shroomish, and it isn't just some bottom feeder at the bottom of the water like Magikarp or Dratini. And considering Wurmple exists here, Shroomish just has to watch out for its buggy bite and should be able to fight off Zigzagoon with relative ease. Finally, we have arguably one of the laziest Pokemon of all time, even though its real-life counterpart isn't, and one of the slowest, Slackoth. Slackoth lolls around and sleeps for more than 20 hours a day, which can make those around it drowsy. Since it does not move very much, it does not need much food and only eats 3 leaves each day. Its heart only beats once per minute. And in Generation 3, Slackoth was its signature move to really exemplify the slowness and the sleepiness. It makes its nest in tropical forests and keeps the same one during its entire life, a little homebody. However, it can travel far by swimming in rivers, which I call absolute garbage. It's not swimming, it's probably just floating on down considering this Pokemon, but whatever, say what you will. And, as mentioned in the Sleep Style Dex, Snorlax's drowsy power is the only thing that will make Slackoth move, as it will then move to sleep near Snorlax. Sometimes I think how nice it would be to just be able to sleep 20 hours a day, and then I realize I lose 20 hours out of my lifespan. There's no winning on that one. Now, the thing about sloths is that they can be fairly durable. Falling from trees of certain heights leave them fairly unscathed, which there's a lot of incorrect information about sloths out there that we should really clean up, so let's take a tangent. All of the information I'm about to share with you is thanks to the Sloth Conservation Foundation. Starting off, sloths are not dumb. They are actually fairly smart, having fairly large brains, and do not mistake their own arms for branches. In fact, they are very careful, ensuring that when they grab a branch, it can hold their weight, and they've got a pretty strong grip. Our beloved sloths are actually something called xenothrans, a very ancient superorder of mammals that includes all of the modern sloths, as well as anteaters and armadillos, meaning they are unrelated to our ursine or bear friends, as many would think they are. We also get to find out about why Slackoth is similar to a kind of ape or bear if we look at its evolutions by looking at its naming origin of sloths. In Spanish, the name for sloth is oso perezoso, which can be translated as sloth bear or lazy bear. Common names can be confusing, which is why scientific names are so helpful. As it turns out, there's actually something called a sloth bear, and it has absolutely nothing to do with sloths. Sloth bears are true bears that live in India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. Also, I was not ready to do an accent while speaking Spanish. That was way past what I was ready for. Now, sloths actually don't sleep much. They sleep 8 to 10 hours a day, so more than I do, and they are not slow because they are intoxicated on leaves that they eat. Instead, there are several different factors underlying the sloth's slowness. Poor vision, predator avoidance, a low-calorie diet, specialized muscle fibers, a slow rate of digestion, and a low metabolic rate. I highly recommend looking into their website, as you can see truly how there are so many incorrect pieces of information out there about sloths. The coolest of all actually probably being is that they don't stink, and instead their fur likely has a sort of fungus within it that may be able to be used to help fight types of cancer. Oddly enough though, despite all of our additions to this forest here, the only special interactions occurring come from adding in shroomish, so no big picture to paint here. Back to past me as I go spend the rest of my time editing up this video. Woo! Okay, so as we go through this, we are not actually following the normal route that you would play through as you get through the story of Hoenn, because you kind of loop around quite a bit in this game. So, for the sake of ease and my sanity to ensure that I cover everything and not miss a single thing, we are moving on to Route 105 instead of continuing north just to turn back around after visiting Wishmer Cave. So we'll come back to that. Let's just go through the routes in sequential order. Route 105. This water route boasts gentle currents, which makes it safe for even poor swimmers to bask in. Here we will find Tentacool, Magikarp, and 2 new Pokemon. Which, as I reveal one of them, the info brings us to an interesting point, because seagulls are natural predators of jellyfish. It helps that they just eat everything, I suppose, and with a large span of water with no land nearby to scavenge, the Wingull starts hunting around, eating fish, anything in abundance. Well, Tentacool float along the surface, eating whatever fish they can drift into, making them easy to spot and catch if Wingull can just see past their camouflage. The problem is that Tentacool can and will fight back. This supplies us with 2 things. 1, an abundance of food for higher population counts and easier living. 2, some level of pressure when Tentacool fight back. On a real bad day, when a Wingull gets desperate for food, it hits its breaking point and evolves into Pelipper. Alternatively, they just simply live long enough and evolve anyway. Inside Pelipper's bill is a throat pouch that it uses to carry eggs and small Pokemon such as its own young and Pyukumuku, and is large enough to fit a small child in. Whoever put their child inside of a Pelipper's mouth, why? Did that happen in real life? Due to this, Pelipper is often compared to as a courier or messenger. Skimming across the top of waves, it scoops food from the sea and swallows it in one gulp. It can swallow up to 30 wishy-washy in one go, and loves to eat abandoned love discs that are too despondent to be wary near the sea surface. Its heart got broken, so it's just not paying attention to the world, it's crying in the corner, sad days. It builds its nest on steep cliffs facing the sea. Young male Pelipper are in charge of gathering food and bringing it back to others at its nest. Pelipper rests its wings while floating in the ocean. I've said it before, I'll say it again, age and evolution are not necessarily one and the same. Living longer can result in you evolving through your experiences, but just because you're old does not mean you will evolve. You can evolve earlier, you can evolve later, you may never evolve. Age and evolution are not one and the same, and that needs to be a video at some point. I'm doing a video on Pokemon eggs at the end of this month, but that is entirely separate still. I will say, I always found it incredibly odd that we have this Pokemon that is trusted to hold others within its mouth and not eat them. We really do have a Finding Nemo situation going on here. P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney, that is burned into my brain forever. And I found out because I was curious, it's not a dentist's office, but it is a sports club, as it is a real place in Australia. Anywho, yes, this makes Petalburg very easy to determine its diet. It's fish! God, I love Lilo and Stitch so much. Moving on though, because speaking of Finding Nemo, we do have another big eater on our hands. Though this one is just an itty bitty little baby one, as we have the ball whale Pokemon, Wailmer. Wailmer stores water inside its body, which it expels through its nostrils to startle people. When storing water in its body, it can turn into a bouncing ball. The more water filling its body, the higher it can bounce. Hold the phone. Hold on. You're telling me this thing fills itself with water and it bounces better? How? Let's look into this. Let's look at this scientifically. So, to make something bounce better, you need higher elasticity. And you also need to be able to compress it. Both are very important. This means that yes, something filled with water does bounce better than something filled with air, as the water can be compressed without breaking, then snap back elasticity without breaking as well. So, yeah, I guess Wailmer filling with water makes it bounce better. Scientifically proven. It becomes lethargic when it is dry. It swims with its mouth open and eats tons of food a day, such as wishy-washy. It lives in the sea, can only live on land for a short amount of time. It occasionally bounces onto the beaches to play. On rare occasions, pods can also be washed up on shore, a result of genetic memories of having once lived on land. Delmise and Sharpedo are natural predators to Wailmer, and Cetotl is thought to be its close relative. So, yes, Cetotl is thought to be a close relative, but scientifically that would actually make no sense unless Cetotl is just the last whale that decided to stay on land. Because otherwise, for some reason that I am educationally unaware of, some creatures on land left to the water, saying screw you to their entire family that put effort into growing legs and instead returned to the water to become whales. You literally had to go from water to land, back to water, and of course that occurs over thousands, really actually tens of thousands or more years. Nevertheless, I would argue day in and day out that Cetotl and Wailmer are very, 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 very distantly related or unrelated at all. Third cousins maybe that were removed multiple times that you would only see in an awkward encounter at a potluck for the family that you haven't gone to in 5 years. Why is that so specific? But who would have guessed? The region that is 50% water has Pokemon that just kinda eats fish. I should really just have a fun video ranking all the regions one day in an in-depth analysis. What do you think about that? We're gonna take a slight detour along this wavy route of ours and pass into Island Cave, a place where you must be unmoving, frozen solid, as time passes you by twice. And as 2 minutes pass, the clock striking twice round the wheel, then you may encounter Reg Ice. The hard thing with Reg Ice, and really the rest of the Reggies, is that they don't really eat, and they aren't really impactful to the ecosystem, with each of them being carved from materials throughout the world, maybe even during events of different eras of life by Regigigas during its journey of towing the continents. Though, Reg Ice simply serves as a symbol of ice, waiting to reawaken at the command of Regigigas, or to be used in tandem with its siblings to reawaken Big Daddy Gigas. I don't like that. That just put a terrifying thought into my head. If you know BioShock, I want you to then imagine the Big Daddy from BioShock. If you don't know the Big Daddy from BioShock, here it is. Now imagine that as a Regigigas coming after you. I'm good. I don't want to be a part of that universe. Route 106. This is the site of serious battles between fishermen of the seaside area and the wild Pokemon of the seas. Nothing new here, just Tentacle, Wingull, Pelipper, Magikarp, and Wailmer in similar numbers to before. We're gonna get this a lot. 50% water. And not a lot of water Pokemon added. We land now in Dewford Town, and of course we have to go hunt down Steven through Granite Cave. And there are a couple of different rooms to go through, so we get a nice little picture at the end of this section, so be prepared. Floor 1F, which I just realized was just me saying floor 1 floor, similar to chai tea or non-bread. I am sorry for all the pain I've caused. We have similar faces in old of Zubat, Geodude, and Abra. The three really don't interact with each other, or really can't for that matter. Geodude isn't attractive to Zubat because it doesn't have blood. Zubat is likely just resting here during the day, and Abra is a berry eater that teleports everywhere to escape trouble. Though we do have one new friend on this floor in the shape of a dumpling that loves sumo fighting styles, Makuhita. Makuhita is a very gutsy Pokemon and never gives up, no matter how many times it gets knocked down. In fact, energy is built into its body each time it rises back up. That is actually pretty cool to think about, to have some sort of internal mechanism that actually encourages you to get the tar beat out of you. Broken trees often surround its nest because it trains by slapping and slamming into them. It is known to mistake Executor for a tree and often gets flung away as a result. I have said this before and I've said it again. I need to pay an animator one day when I have the money and I'm not just, paying bills with this and I have the extra money to just animate a scene where a Makuhita walks over to a tree. Bah! Alright, he breaks it. Walks over to the next tree. Bah! Breaks it again. And then walks over to the third tree. Bah! Nothing happens. Instead, you just hear like the kunk and just like the leather sound of something slowly coming down as the head of an Alolan Executor stretches all the way to meet Makuhita face to face. We get that close-up of Makuhita, just the shadow of Executor on its face as now Makuhita begins to sweat more and more. And we get a shot of the open sea as we then watch Makuhita skip across the water into the distance. Don't need to explain anything else. Inferencing and implications are all there for the viewer to understand. Back to Makuhita, this Pokemon eats lots of food and gets plenty of sleep. Its rigorous training and lifestyle give it a sturdy body able to withstand any attack. It is found living and training in mountainous areas, although initially brought from another region to Alola, Makuhita found in Alola are more famous than its region's counterparts. So this makes it a little bit difficult. We would expect Makuhita and many other fighting types to eat lots of meat and protein to efficiently build muscle. But at the same time, many of our fighting types are noble creatures, thus their typing, and that is not me giving too much credit. They are the counterpart to Dark-type Pokemon, which are considered underhanded, not necessarily evil. Think of it this way. We don't have a light type. The closest we get is the fairy typing after all these years. In the interim between the beginning and Kalos, we had fighting, and then we also got dark types introduced in Generation 2. Dark types are underhanded, fighting in a way that would betray society, throwing sand in eyes, stealing, being a heel in wrestling, and performing Darkest Lariat, you name it. In this case, who do you need to save you in a bad situation? A hero, a superhero, and that is what fighting types are. They are the types that are noble, train hard, assist others, eat a varied diet, and are protective. You can see these descriptions in many different fighting types, especially any based around a martial art. So, as we shift back into our ecosystems, it is incredibly difficult to say that a fighting type would eat another Pokemon unless it explicitly states it. Plus, in order to get protein, you could eat plenty of legumes, vegetables, and maybe some acorns? Apparently acorns have 8.1 grams of protein for every 100 grams and are full of healthy fat, meaning they're at least somewhat sustainable. which that would make sense as to why Makuhita also trains against trees. It's not just punching the trees in order to, like, actually train itself up. It's punching the trees to make them drop berries, to make them drop nuts, to make them drop acorns. There are also wild grains, but either way, fighting types are eating a lot to maintain their lifestyle and their values, and as such, I am claiming, unless explicitly stated otherwise, all fighting types do not eat meat. I guess an exception to if people serve them stew. Long story short, Makuhita is likely just here to train. I'm sure it gets swooped on by the Zubat though, and that is part of said training. As we move forward, we do finally see Steven in that little room of his. And there we get Zubat, Abra, Makuhita, and a little metal-eating friend in Aron, who I always use the name Alphonse as a little baby weeb Krillix to name these Pokemon. I mean, look at it. It's an armor Pokemon. Why would you not name it Alphonse? Aron feeds on iron ore that it digs from mountains. It uses this ore to make its body. Sometimes, hunger will drive it to descend the mountains to eat bridges and rails, which makes it a pest. It makes a new suit of armor after evolving, while its old discarded armor is salvaged for making iron products. People have been collecting Aron's shed armor since ancient times. With one all-out charge, it can demolish even a heavy dump truck. It lives on mountains, and as mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, Aron has been observed eating an iron ore snack on rare occasions. So yes, that is literally an armored carapace that its body somehow produces? Though, I guess it's no different than the way that, like, say, armadillos or turtles produce their shells in some level of sense. So, an armadillo shell is composed of plates of bone connected by soft fibers made from collagen, known as sharp-based fibers. These tiles are covered in a layer of epidermal scales made of keratin, according to One Kind Planet. And when we look at turtles, we also get something similar, but not the same, as it too mentions keratin, though in the form of keratin scutes covering layers of living tissue over its bone dome of a shell. So maybe our little friend here has something in place of keratin, using the iron instead as a replacement. Would be kind of cool to see Aron shed some of the armor off bit by bit, maybe even see what's under it, because, you know, everyone asks what's under Cubone's skull, but nobody asks what's under Aron's armor. Hypocrites. Or you just never thought of it, I guess. Aron is basically our Onyx of the region in terms of cave building, while its final form does protect the mountains that it resides in or around, being far kinder inherently than it seems on the surface, and nothing would inherently try to eat it in return, that we know of yet. Though, it would break into fights with some Pokemon, I am sure, if they were ever to cross each other. But that's for us to talk about in the future, as we only have the cute little Ore Eater Aron right now. We do have one more floor in B2F as we step deeper below. We find more Zubat and more Aron down here as it is darker, and there is more uneaten ore here. We glance at an Abra disappearing in a flash, we discover some of the rocks we crack open are actually Geodudes, but there are more here. Hiding in the shadows and amongst other rocks, we find two new friends, which is not the greatest word to use. One is thought to be a gem hunter, a robber, a thief reborn, a thief of jewels and a connoisseur of the finest rupees. Our little Stitch in the form of a Pokemon, Sableye. It has pale blue gemstone-like eyes, which allow it to see in low light and sparkle in the dark. It also has a red gemstone on its chest, and its back has a blue and green gemstone, as well as another red one. These gem-like eyes and adornments on its body are caused by its diet, which consists of rocks and raw gemstones. Because of this, each individual Sableye can create an infinite number of patterns on its body. That is something I don't see enough of, honestly. We could have Sableyes with an infinite number of patterns. Do you realize how weirdly pretty this little goblin of a Pokemon could look? It would drool a waterfall if it ever got to see Deontay, though it does target Carbink as prey. And even then, they don't even always get to eat the carbink because then Gabites will grab them before Sableye can, adding them to their little hordes. Sableye is feared by people since it was rumored to steal a person's soul if you look into its eyes. Gotta love the superstitions in the Pokédex. It is nocturnal and is rarely seen, living in the darkness of caves. It uses its claws to dig for gems to eat and fight back. As mentioned in the sleep-style decks, Sableye is known to occasionally sleep while holding its gemstones. It is believed that Sableye dreams of eating gemstones until it feels satisfied. It lives, breathes, eats, sleeps, dreams of gemstones. You know what? I respect it. I respect it and knows what it's about, and I would be a sinful individual to say otherwise. Sableye actually does serve as a creator of some tunnels, since it will also dig branching tunnels as it searches for gems. So we have plenty of vast cave systems with the way all these Pokemon act. I doubt it would go after any of our Pokemon friends we have mentioned unless they were holding a Geode in their hands, or maybe if it thought Geodude, it has Geode in its name, may actually be able to be broken open for some sort of crystals within its body. So again, we have like Onix in Kanto or Johto, Steelix even, where they will go ahead and dig through and make massive tunnels, and then all the other Pokemon will take refuge in them, whether they be Diglett or Zubat or whatever else. Whereas in this region, Geodude can, break things apart. They're grabbing rocks and eating them, especially if they have moss on them. And then we don't have any really big players, so all we have are Aeron, or the Aeron line, and then we also have Sableye, with some small additions to the caves with other Pokemon that you could suspect. So, one big one versus 100 little guys, basically. Though, again, there is one other here that is a potential threat to not only rock-type Pokemon, but also any other Pokemon or even humans within these caves. Inspired by a yokai of similar appearance, we have the Deceiver Pokemon Mawile. Its most notable feature is a pair of large black jaws emerging from the back of its head. They contain 10 sharp metallic teeth, 6 on the top row, 4 on the bottom, while the jaws are actually transformed steel horns. Mawile can articulate them at will, using them to bite enemies with enough force to break an iron beam. These jaws are incapable of tasting, leading Mawile to use them to eat food it does not like. So yeah, if it deems you a pittance of a meal unworthy of gracing its taste buds, you will be delegated to a death most unsavory within the greater maw upon its head. Actually, that would be pretty useful. There are many times where I've eaten I didn't care what I put into my body. It's like, all right, I need protein, I need starch, I need energy. Just put the food into my body. I don't care what it is, as long as it doesn't hurt me, and I'm going. I don't care what it tastes like. That type of ability would be incredibly useful. Mawile is typically found in caves. It uses its non-threatening appearance to make foes underestimate it, then attacks with its giant jaws, sometimes swallowing its prey whole. When engaged in battle, Mawile usually has its back turned to the enemy to make better use of its jaws. So yeah, it says nothing about what its meal preferences are in terms of what its diet consists of, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if it would eat literally everything it can to support itself nutritionally. In addition, why do you think it sits in these caves? It's perfect disguise for, or rather camouflage, for its hair-like extensions, those horns that it has. You can see the bright yellow body, a creature that looks very weak, docile, one that can easily get eaten or attacked. And as you approach it, you are not going to see the perfectly camouflaged black horns within the dark of the cave itself. Meaning once you are close, this reverse anglerfish is going to devour you. Basement 2F has roughly the, oh wait, what? I just realized that was supposed to be basement 1F. So ignore that. That was basement 1F. Now we're on basement 2F. I'm not fixing that. It has roughly the same numbers, though Makuhita is not found this deep. Instead, we have higher numbers of Sableye. In addition, if we crush some rocks, we might get a surprise Geodude. Alternatively, other rocks may get hit by our strike and slowly turn letting that concrete sound grind as it reveals itself to actually be a nosepass. Nosepass cannot go near other nosepass since it would repel them with its magnetic nose. Its magnetism is stronger in cold seasons. To protect itself when in danger, it raises its magnetism and draws iron object to its body. This technique is also used to capture prey. Yes, it has prey, though it can pull natural enemies close too. Because it always points north, Nosepass has historically been used as a compass for travelers. Nosepass only moves a little over 3/8 of an inch every year, but can quickly spin its body into the ground like a drill during emergency situations. It lives in caves, and Metang are natural predators of Nosepass. So we finally have a more fleshed out portion of the ecosystem between our rock and steel type Pokemon, because Nosepass is a predator and prey to others. Pokemon that would eat earth and steel, though Nosepass is not quite steel yet. You might ask why it eats others. This is because it is searching for things such as Magnetite, considering Probopass is a steel type with a stronger magnetism than Nosepass. Why do I imagine two Nosepass trying to kiss and they can't because of their magnetic, poles resisting each other? They do have eggs, so you can breed them. This puts a thought into my head that I cannot say here, but if they can't face each other, go ahead and imagine how Nosepass breed. Now, who's to say I won't say that on a live stream at some point, so maybe join me for those, because I'm just as talkative there while being more unhinged, if you can believe it. Also, let's take a tangent. Yes, the cold does improve magnetism. According to US Magnetics, exposing a magnet to colder temperatures will increase its magnetism. The molecules within a magnet will move slower because they have less kinetic energy, so there is less vibration within a magnet's molecules. This allows for a more concentrated magnetic field that strengthens the magnet. So, a Nosepass with stronger magnetism in winter makes perfect sense. Now, we can expect fights to break out between Geodude, Nosepass, and Aeron, as all three of them do eat rocks to live and are within each other's capabilities to hunt. Though, there are two others that can be added to this in a more dastardly and horrifying way. So, let's get a picture for how this cave exists. Digging through the cave, expanding it vastly, we have a slew of Pokemon. Though, these Pokemon dig not for the sake of expansion, but for the sake of their own stomachs, as they claw away at harsh granite in search of their next meal. This has created a full cave that can house Zubat during the day as they wait for their chance to fly into the dark of night, camouflaged by the lightless sky. Though they may take some shots at meals within the cave on occasion. This would include a Makuhita that wanders in, training itself up and getting a little too aggressive with other Pokemon from time to time just in order to test its own strength. That same Makuhita chases an Abra, and it disappears. It runs after a Geodude, and it is somewhat okay with the Dumpling Child, but would prefer to search for rocks with moss on it, its favorite snack after all. So, the Makuhita continues deeper into the cave, where it can run into a more sturdy foe, the Aeron. Once again, though, the Aeron don't care for Makuhita and would rather munch on rocks. Maybe Geodude, if it has enough metal in its body. And so, Makuhita ventures even deeper, feeling ignored, challengeless. As it reaches the next layer under, it begins to see shadows in the dark, shifting and turning. The glint of light on occasion strikes a bit of fear, but also a moment of excitement, as adrenaline pumps through Makuhita's body. It rushes forward and strikes, only to pass through the body of a Sableye that cackles, the sharpness of its laugh ringing through the cave. Makuhita swings again and again, yet it cannot land a single blow. It naturally has no moves that it can hit the Sableye with, and so it deems Makuhita a joke and not worth the time. But that laughing stops short as it looks past Makuhita. Sweaty ectoplasm drips down Sableye's face, and it runs away into one of the many branches of tunnels it has created. Makuhita, confused, turns around to see a small child in the form of Mawile, who simply stares with a cold glare. Makuhita gets excited once more. Clearly, this Pokemon is strong if the Sableye ran away from it. So, the Makuhita prepares itself, wanting to train against the Mawile, not noticing that as it gets closer, it is already too late. The large lock of hair is already poised to strike, invisible in the darkness, and guaranteed to catch prey in these circumstances. A large and hearty meal that might have a chance to escape, but not a guaranteed chance. Route 107. The local children of Dewford Town practice long-distance swimming in the waters of this aquatic route. Guess what? Nothing new. Tentacle, Magikarp, Wilmer, Wingull, Pelipper. Moving on to Route 108. People come swimming from as far as the Kalos region to see the site of Sea Mauville. Same as the previous route, really makes this easy. Though, now as we are deeper out at sea and I want to share something interesting, let me tell you about what I watched when viewing Blue Planet from the Discovery Channel, which involved a blue whale, her pup, and some killer whales. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but I was not ready to watch as the blue whale and her pup were basically just constantly harassed by killer whales, the orcas, until eventually they could work together to separate the mom from the pup and then drowned the blue whale pup, which I was shocked by. Like, it is a coordinated effort, and then they feast. It is terrifying. The sea gets very dark. But hey, such is the way of the ecosystem, so how about we get a little similarly dark as we look at two little detours on our path, starting with Sea Mauville, a facility only existing in the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire games that was decommissioned dozens of years ago. It is now maintained as a natural preserve. I usually wouldn't consider it a place to look at in these videos, but man, the work ethic there is terrible, and it is a preserve now. Unfortunately, it also represents the work culture that can be seen in Japan under terrible companies. So, here are the 10 rules that they had there. Say good morning very loudly. Don't bring Pokemon to your workplace. Always arrive on time, always stay late. Lay your life on the line in safety checks. Take joint responsibility for teamwork. Obey your superiors' orders absolutely. Maintain top quality. Give up your sanity. Worship and praise the founder. Don't expect time off before you retire. And no need to think, just work unceasingly. Yeah, this place deserved to be decommissioned and bought out. Though there are confidential documents found here that we'll talk about as they covered infinite energy, the Pokemon's replenishable life force fueling their moves, and the energy used in the Pokemon world to run major machines and more. It is a bioenergy, and the reported investigation was done on Watson of Mauville City's gym, who was deemed a traitor to the company as he was hiding information from them during the darker management times. The old man helped put an end to the corrupt company, then lives his days happily as a gym leader, like an absolute Chad. And he's happy for it. Look at that avatar. They claim for this area to be a preserve, so it is completely hands-off in terms of humanity and protected from other humans, which is why I do consider it here. So, through all of this, we find all the same water Pokemon inside and outside of the facility as they make it their home. Alternatively, only existing in the original games, we do have the abandoned ship. The abandoned ship is a tattered old ship that looks like it could carry passengers and cargo when it was in operation. This old ship has many rusted holes, broken doors, and items of furniture scattered around rooms. It is seemingly, in my opinion, a reference to the Titanic, as the abandoned ship is mentioned by a character in the Oceanic Museum, saying that the model of the SS Anne reminds him of the abandoned ship. The ship contained a rare scanner when it sank, and it is now buried deep within the ship. Also, yes, there was another ship that looked exactly like the Titanic, which made a lot of conspiracy stuff come up, which I'm not going to cover here. I don't know when I would ever cover it. But it also looks like the Titanic if we look at the Pokemon Adventures manga. The only Pokemon of note here besides Tentacool and Magikarp is Tentacruel, so we know that with the abandonment of this area, the jellyfish have taken root. But why? I've never actually understood why jellyfish are chosen to take over sunken ships. The only thing I can think of is maybe because they visually seem like ghosts of the water. They are ethereal, kind of being able to see through them. They're relatively invisible in the water, and they float with no discernible care. and touching them can cause great harm. So maybe it's less of an ecology thing and more of a sea ghost thing and just a trope that we see everywhere else anyway. Route 109. People and Pokemon alike enjoy ocean swims in this water route. Nothing new, once again, like the encounter rates are even the exact same as previous watery routes. Route 110. A time-worn path where nature remains untouched. Above it on this route stretches the huge cycling road. We are finally back on land and can talk about new Pokemon here. I will note once again, we did jump around a bit, so the encounters are getting tapered back to their lower levels once more for our organizational purposes. Though that likely won't matter for you unless you are actually following along route per route. Is there anybody that does that? Do any of you actually follow like what I'm doing route by route, having on their other screen the routes open? I'm very curious because I know there are some other like super diehard individuals in terms of stats and information that may do that. While in the water we may see Tentacool and Magikarp, we do have plenty of Pokemon on land to discuss that reside under the cycling road or flying high above it. We do have Poochyena and Zigzagoon back alongside Wingull. There are Oddish hiding about and moving at night since the sun is too harsh for them as they search for nutrient-rich soil, but we also get 4 new additions. First up is a feather-capped green blob that swallows anything of its own size as its stomach comprises most of its body. Gulpin. Its heart and brain are very small in comparison to its stomach, which when we look at brain to body size ratios, it does help give a general guess as to how an intelligent creature might be in real life, and this one is clearly thinking with its stomach. The unique stomach acid it has allows it to digest almost anything. When it is digesting, vile, overpowering gases are expelled, otherwise known as farting. It lives in grasslands and savannas. As mentioned in the sleep style decks, Gulpin is known to move its mouth while sleeping. When Gulpin's mouth is closed, that means it's digesting its food. If Gulpin's mouth is open, that means its stomach is empty. So if you see this thing staring at you with an open mouth, it's not dumb. It is looking for its next meal. And you are the dinner plate. And you are sitting on the dinner plate. So yeah, it isn't poisonous because it's destroying the environment. It's not poisonous because it actually has poison. It's poisonous because it's just a balloon of acid. And, I mean, it does spit it up. And living under Cycling Road is perfect for it. Not only does it get to eat other Pokemon down here if it can catch any of them, but it can also just eat any falling scraps that come off of Cycling Road from trainers using it. I'm not sure what would try to eat Gulpin. I don't think there's anything here, potentially even within this region that would try. Though I imagine it would be an infinitely worse version of trying to eat haggis, if you did try. To follow this, we do have to congratulate the Pokemon world as it has had a healthy birth to twins. They may be opposites, but they get along phenomenally together in the forms of the cheering Pokemon Minun and Plusle. Minun cares more for its teammates than itself. Wow, that's not healthy. Sending off showers of sparks when it cheers for them. When its partner is in trouble, it gives off increasing amounts of sparks. It can create electric pom-poms for cheering. Its electrical current promotes blood circulation and energizes its target. It lives in grasslands and savannas. However, it will hide under the caves of houses when it rains due to its dislike of water. Minun is often seen together with Plusle. Meanwhile, with Plusle, it can create sparkly pom-poms by shorting out the electrical current in its palms. It uses these pom-poms to cheer its teammates and will cry loudly if they lose. It climbs telephone poles to absorb electricity, lives in grassland savannas, and is, of course, often seen with Minun. These two are incredibly cute mice, being our Pikachu clones of the region. As such, we could expect them to feed on plants, insects, and if we want to make this stretch, we can say that they will eat birds, since rats will eat vulnerable chicks' eggs where they can alongside other small mammals. This makes it far less of a stretch when we consider Oddish is here as a nice plant full of nutrients, and Wingull is literally right there, being incredibly weak to the tiniest little static shock, even though its nests are, assumedly, much farther away on the edges of cliffs where other Pokemon won't reach it. Things are not all safe and well for these twins, as they run into hiding alongside many of our other Pokemon residing here when a wolf begins to wander among them. Its body supercharged by electricity with every step it takes, ready to launch at its next prey with blinding speed as we barely catch the glimpse of Electrike. Using the electrical charge found in its fur, Electrike stimulates its leg muscles and runs faster than the human eye can follow. It uses friction from the atmosphere to generate electricity. Because of this, its body gives off showers of sparks in seasons with arid air or before a storm. As shown in the Pokemon the Series Diamond and Pearl episode, the Electrike Company, using metal brushes to groom the Electrike will cause the metal to conduct the electrical charge in the fur and subsequently shock the handler. It lives in grasslands and savannas. So yes, it is quite literally just a wolf and not based on any other real-life specific dog that I could figure out. Maybe a jackal, I suppose. Either way, it is absolutely a predator, a carnivore. The only ones safe here are Gulpin and Oddish, maybe Poochyena if it is in a large enough pack, though I am sure it will probably still nibble a here and there. Despite the slew of Pokemon, there isn't much of a picture to actually paint here, honestly. Gulpin is going to try and eat everyone if it gets a chance. The twin Pokemon have no real threats if they stay together other than groups of Zigzagoon, Poochyena, and the Alolan Electrike, and Oddish just better hope it's not seeing anybody for the most part. We'll cover some of these Pokemon later in better detail for those picture painting enthusiasts out there. Route 111. This expansive route includes a desert where sandstorms rage unceasingly and a mountain pass. This is one of the areas I know many of you have been waiting on and are excited for, so I'll make an exception to my usual rules and we will cover all available naturally occurring Pokemon here, regardless of the level rule that we have. Starting with the surface of the water, we do have Goldeen, Marill, and Surskit. Deeper in the water, we do get more Goldeen, Magikarp, and Mr. Whiskers himself, the Barboach. It has several blue barbels that are used as a superb radar in murky water. These whiskers are left exposed when it hides in the mud to wait for prey. A slimy film covers its body, which protects Barboach from bacteria and allows it to easily escape from predators like bird Pokemon. Barboach remains in its aquatic environment to prevent itself from drying out and becoming weak. Barboach can also use its whiskers to detect the location of its prey and to detect both smell and flavor, similar to a human. So, I couldn't just let that be. I had to look into this further. And yes, according to North Dakota Game and Fish, channel catfish have one of the most highly developed senses of taste of all of North Dakota's fishes. While taste buds are most abundant near the mouth and on its barbels, its whiskers, the entire body of a channel catfish is covered in taste receptors. That sounds absolutely horrid. Do you know how many things I run into accidentally? Imagine tasting your clothes at all times. It sounds terrible. Creatures poop in that water, sir! Now, speaking of taste, though, this tells us nothing about what they eat. Considering we do have a catfish here, according to ChesapeakeBay.net, channel catfish are bottom feeders and eat a wide variety of foods, including insects, mollusks, crustaceans, snails, snakes, fish, and small birds. Younger channel catfish are more omnivorous, eating a balanced variety of plants and small animals. In other words, right now, Barboach is not actively hunting any of the other water Pokemon currently, unless they are smaller than it, which they are not. So, bottom feeding will do for now. As we shift onto land, we do see Sandshrew, there are Geodude posing as rocks, and then there are 3 other Pokemon that we have not seen before. One hiding within the sand, one simply in plain sight, and the other camouflaged by the sandstorms whipping about. First up, we have one of my personal favorites, Trapinch, which I personally always name Goggles because of Flygon's design. Trapinch's large jaws are powerful enough to crush any boulders that get in its way as it digs through the sand of the arid deserts in which it lives. It can go a week without water or food. Instead of actively hunting for prey, it digs into the sand to build its bowl or cone-shaped nests. waiting for prey to tumble inside and become trapped. When night falls, Trapinch will dig itself a spot underneath the sand and go to sleep. Due to the size of its head, in contrast to its small body, Trapinch will be unable to get up after flipping over onto its back, making it vulnerable to natural predators such as sandile. These are basically just your antlions of the desert waiting for their prey of all kinds, conserving energy and devouring whoever is so unlucky or careless to fall into its inescapable trap. I don't know what it is about them though. I mean, I do think Trapinch is absolutely adorable. And I mean, how could I not help but smile anytime I see them? They are already smiling at me. I need to smile back to at least be polite. Alternatively though, if you look closely at some of the cacti in the area, you may see one just twitch. This is your sign to leave the area, as that is not just a cactus, but a cacnea. Cacnea uses its thorny arms like hammers to attack its opponents. It is able to live in deserts for 30 days without any water, due to its body being able to store moisture. The beauty and fragrance of its yellow flower depend on the harshness of the environment. This flower releases a strong aroma to attract prey. When prey approaches, Cacnea shoots sharp thorns to bring it down. So yeah, pretty effective on any Pokemon looking for fruit, water, or nectar, as it also just gets to wait for desperate individuals to draw near. That includes humans, by the way, fairly cut and dry. Though it is interesting to see that Cacnea serves as a mimic to cacti. It is a Pokemon that takes advantage of other flowering cacti, as any other animal would have adapted to trying to find this nectar, and instead of finding a cactus, they find a creature that is then going to grab them and devour them. This last of the three here is a bit strange, as if we couldn't just go a single generation without having some sort of completely null creature within the ecosystem that doesn't take part in it at all and serves as an anomaly. Hey, Ditto, Drowsy, you got another member over here. Take him with you. Yeah, it's Baltoy. It moves by spinning on this single pointed foot and balances upright to sleep. Baltoy is usually found in ruins and old graveyards, where it assembles with its kind and unleashes loud cries. Old cave wall paintings depict it living with people in ancient times. As seen in the Pokemon the series Ruby and Sapphire episode, Me, Myself, and Time, an ancient civilization used Baltoy for time travel when spinning on a magical circle artifact. It has no mouth, nothing is going to try to eat it, and it is an ancient Pokemon. And it can time travel when it groups up using an artifact. Why? Why does this have to be so weird and complicated and not ecosystem-y? It doesn't take part in it. It gives me a headache every single region there's one Pokemon like this. It just, nothing eats it, it eats nothing, and it does something weird. Ultimately, it is a clay doll, hence its evolution, clay doll. So, maybe if there were other rock or ground type Pokemon looking for a meal, they would try their luck at it. But they would have a real bad time in doing so, since this is not a weak Pokemon. So, I digress, and our little desert ecosystem is as follows. At the very bottom of the water, we find Barboach. It swims about, gathering up the debris of all that falls from above. These shifting sands of the desert grind up all that resides above, and the wind deposits them here, where it can enjoy plentiful meals while being unbothered by the muck. In fact, it quite enjoys it, as it helps keep its body in a covering of healthy film. The Magikarp also find this to be fine, as they don't have to hunt for anything and simply exist freely. At least, these two Pokemon would live freely were it not for the aggressive Goldeen in the area attempting to spear them for being in its territory and eating them afterwards. These Goldeen, as the other two might do, will rise to the surface on occasion, where it will find Surskit moving about across the top of the water. They can get lucky and grab this little water strider as their next rare meal, or alternatively, they may make a deadly mistake, going after another blue lure in the water as they bite onto a Marill tail, then being ripped from the water by the blue mouse and eaten as part of its next meal. These same Marill and Surskit may travel from the water on occasion, wanting to leave the areas as Surskit is rather rare here and Marill would like to find some shelter. This is not to say they travel together. I almost guarantee that Marill would probably absolutely try to eat Surskit whenever they cross paths. They, though, individually may cross paths with a Sandshrew, who will struggle against battling either of the individuals. And so, said Sandshrew changes course and sees an opening in the ground. It knows exactly what this is and attempts to dig deep underneath. If it digs just right, it can surprise the lazy trapinch sitting at the bottom and get a new, fresh meal. If it makes a mistake here, then it will just become the next meal for the antlion. We return back to Surskit though, as it is attempting to leave the desert, though this proves incredibly difficult, and it is in need of water quickly. So, it follows the sweet scent that hangs in the air to a group of cacti. It sips from the flowers of one, but as it moves to another, it is pincushioned by the arms of Cacnea, who draws it in and smiles at its freshly caught prey. As for Baltoy and Geodude, they have no real threats here, so they peacefully reside within these deserted lands, though the Baltoy may stare upon the desert and see in their memories a civilization of old, letting out a cry in the night as part of their morning rituals. Route 112. This route is popular among trainers because it offers the chance to stroll while gazing up at Mount Chimney. Familiar faces reside as we see Machop and Marill, but a slumbering volcano does deserve a Drummel of a camel, as in the highest population count here we find Nummel. It contains in its body magma of almost 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,200 degrees Celsius. A female will have a bigger hump than a male. Nummel is a very strong Pokemon, having served humans for many years with its ability to carry heavy loads up to 220 pounds or 100 kilograms. However, it slows down when wet and cannot stand when it is hungry. Due to its dull wits, their words not mine, it does not notice when it has been hit. Nummel lives on volcanic mountains. He's just an EP strong boy, the himbo of Pokemon right there. This, though, tells us nothing of its diet, so let's take a gander at real-life camels. According to Minnesota Zoo, Bactrian camels, which are actually camels with two humps, but eat practically any vegetation that grows in their arid environment. If forced by hunger, a camel will eat fish, meat, skin, and even bones. At the zoo, each camel eats about 13 to 17.5 pounds of pelleted feed and grass hay per day. In other words, it's primarily eating all the dried grass here that is at the base of the mountain. As for the forced hunger part, this can be considered the case for many different animals, so it's kind of irrelevant here, but cool nevertheless to know that it will munch down on bones even. The ecosystem here doesn't really make sense for Marill to exist unless it's just foraging or passing through. I will note that they may have realized this when Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire was created, as you can no longer find Marill in the area. Route 113. The tall grass on this route is painted a dusty gray by the volcanic ash that pours from Mount Chimney. We see Sandshrew once more, in addition to Skarmory, and if you're like me, you might have thought Skarmory was a Gen 3 Pokemon. Nope, Gen 2. So if you haven't, go check out the combo of Kanto and Johto ecology video that I have, or watch them separate, whatever floats your boat. In addition, we find similar numbers of Sandshrew and Slugma. Slugma's circulatory system is composed entirely of magma, which delivers vital nutrients and oxygen to its organs. To prevent its body from cooling and hardening, Slugma neither sleeps nor ever stops moving. If its body does begin to cool, it will become brittle and may break apart. Slugma constantly seeks warm places and gathers with other members of its species in mountains and volcanoes. Slugma takes magma baths to heal itself. It is believed that when volcanoes were more active in ancient times, they were also seen more often. This is basically the living personification of magma in the form of a snail. Got it. Imagine actually never being able to stop moving, or you basically harden and die. Like, when you think of Pokemon on a much deeper level, you start to realize just how bad life is for some of them. Slugma's life is a treadmill, and it's gonna ride it all night long. While Slugma isn't eating anything or being eaten, simply rejuvenating itself through magma, it does serve as a perfect little reset button. Wherever it passes through, it's burning up, meaning that it can revitalize the soil in the area with the ashen matter of plants. This little guy is probably keeping the ecosystem alive and in check, and nobody knows it or gives a care other than to give the slugma balls joke. The only other one here in the highest encounter rate is actually at 70% with Spinda. It has 4 spots, which can appear anywhere on its face and ears, with a 5th one on the back of its head. These spot patterns are different for each and every Spinda. It has dizzying, confusing, and scattering dance-like movements, though it thinks it is walking in a straight line. These movements confuse their opponents and make it difficult for them to aim at. It typically lives in mountains. This little drunk red panda is likely just eating its fill of highly nutritious berries, inevitably or inadvertently causing it to be perpetually drunk. And yes, that is a thing. Robins do this with honeysuckle berries, cows do this when it comes to cranberries, and so many more. It's the sugars that are inside of them being processed within their bodies. Oddly enough, even though to us, cranberries taste like just absolute garbage if you eat them raw, so bitter and horrible, but they're packed full of nutrients and sugars, oddly enough, that the animals are not, or other animals are not used to processing, so it makes them drunk. Because that's kind of how alcohol works anyway. This all just means that Slugma is left alone while Skarmory gets its pick of either Sandshrew or Spinda depending on the day, and how frustrated it might be trying to take down a Spinda. Let's take a short stroll up through Jagged Pass. The peak itself has no encounters whatsoever. Here though, we see Machop training away in the heats, testing their endurance and willpower. The Numble might even be helping them inadvertently, as Machop could be running food back and forth to them. But there is an unexpected Pokemon here as it bounces around on its tail, keeping itself alive while also not being able to stop moving, similar to how Slugma couldn't. Spoink. Motion is achieved by bouncing on its spring-like tail. The bouncing has a vital function in that it keeps its heart beating. Even while it is sleeping, it continues to bounce. It wears a pearl produced by Clamperl on top of its head, which amplifies its psychic powers. Spoink will be weakened without a pearl and always searches for bigger pearls. In the Pokemon the series Ruby and Sapphire episode Pearls Are a Spoink's Best Friend, it was shown to easily mistake other round objects as its pearl. It lives in mountainous areas and likes to eat mushrooms that grow underground. So, let's just slow this whole thing down real quick. Clamperl, which produces 2 eels that are not psychic types and are not known to be psychically endowed, produces this pearl. Mind you, the pink thing in the mouth of Clamperl is not Clamperl. Yet, since it evolves into these eels, then it insinuates that the pearl is an egg. Meaning, what the heck is that egg then? How did it get there? So why does it have its own unique egg? And is it dead when the Spoink wears it then? Does Spoink just go in? Hold on. I know this one. I get this. Hold on. Drifblim are known to carry Clamperl pearls away for no discernible reason whatsoever. This means that Drifblim grabs it, releases it somewhere, and Spoink ends up getting it. Because there is no way that a Spoink is going deep underwater and bouncing the entire time. It would go multiple seconds without a beating heart if it were to do that. Look, I love Spoink genuinely as one of my favorites, but this whole thing just kind of hurts my head. Nevertheless, it is up here because there are no natural predators for it. And constantly bouncing around makes it incredibly hard to ensure that you aren't going to be seen and then eaten. So you gotta choose between temporarily stalling your heart or being eaten if you are around predators. And don't worry, we'll talk about Clamperl later. I'm not giving up on that one. There's some strong science there. Route 114. This mountain path to Meteor Falls is so long and arduous that even hikers have difficulty tackling it. We have a big slew of Pokemon here. Ones we have already seen before are as follows. In the water we have Goldeen Magikarp, and I guess I'll count Barboach. On the surface is Goldeen, Marill, and Surskit. Rock Smash for Geodude. And then on land we get some conflict with Surskit, and we have Lotad. Though per note, Surskit and Goldeen have the smallest encounters unless you fish for Goldeen. there are 5 new Pokemon incoming, with 2 of them being evolutions. So, get ready for a picture later. Beginning with Lombre. Its entire body is covered in a thin, slimy film that creates an unpleasant sensation when touched. Lombre is sometimes mistaken for a human child. In Kitakami, there is a legend that Lombre was once a mischievous child before being reborn as a Pokemon. Lombre is a nocturnal Pokemon that sleeps on a bed of water grass during the day. It is very mischievous, as it will tug on fishing lines from underwater and pop out to startle people. It feeds on aquatic moss that grows on rocks in the riverbed, and prefers living in waterfronts that contain plenty of food. It tends to become nocturnal to avoid competition with bird Pokemon. So there is a chance that it is eating mice on the rare occasion, but it is likely just eating plants, berries, and so on, not relying so heavily on the photosynthesis of the lily on its head, which would help explain its opposition to birds. To follow this is the wily Pokemon Nuzleaf. If its long pointed nose is grabbed, it will lose its power. The nose functions as a sensory. Using the leaf on its head as a flute, it makes music with leaves that creates a sense of unease in people. However, it can also play comforting melodies. It lives in tropical forests, is skilled at climbing, but will also come out of the forest to frighten people. Nuzleaf uses a sound similar to a grass tune to warn wandering intruders. So when we look at Nuzleaf, or even Shiftry for that matter, we learn nothing about their diet. We could look at their Tengu, their mythical inspirations, but that also tells us nothing. Though it continues to look like a plant, grow like a plant, and even has leaves like a plant, so we will assume that it is now able to sustain itself through photosynthesis, but if necessary, can take nutrients from other plants, as it did when it was Seedot. It's also using its abilities to warn people and keep people out of forests that it protects. Picking up with the next Pokemon, we have Swablu. It does not like dirty surroundings, so it cleans things with its cottony wings diligently. It uses streams, freshwater springs, or a man-made shower to wash its wings when they become dirty from polishing. It is commonly found living in flocks and forested habitats, but often flies closer to towns during the spring. Swablu is very friendly and largely unafraid of humans. As a result, it frequently perches on people's heads like a fluffy little hat. Swablu can easily hide from foes and clouds thanks to its appearance, and as mentioned in the sleep style decks, it is known to sleep curled up with its wings folded. Swablu is believed to be dreaming about perching atop someone's head when it is asleep. It is pretty cute to think that this Pokemon just genuinely wants to have some level of company and being around people. It must have happily coexisted with humanity over the course of its peaceful life. It is a songbird, and considering we do have a very friendly bird that has a very blunt and rounded beak, has similar features of that of a parrot or other songbird, we can draw the conclusion that it eats seeds, fruits, you name it, just no meat, with the exceptional occasion where it might eat a bug, might. And, you know, that does mean that the little C-Dot line is on the buffet menu for sure here. The next two we have appear in roughly equal numbers and serve as bitter rivals to each other. The Mongoose and the Viper in the form of Zangoose and Seviper. With Zangoose, it claims to be the cat-fared Pokemon, which I mean, okay, sure. Mongoose do belong to one of the 4 families of terrestrial cat-like animals, thanks to, you know, the University of Edinburgh stating that. Zangoose is bitter enemies with Seviper, which it has battled for many generations. It is agile enough to easily dodge incoming threats, and it attacks foes with its sharp claws. Despite its hot-blooded and brave nature, it has been known to enjoy peaceful activities, such as listening to ocean waves. Zangoose has a strong immune system and is resistant to venom, and is commonly found as it lives in grasslands and savannas. So, we've raised some more questions that I actually have to answer, and yes, according to Times of India, mongooses usually live in burrows, and they feed on small mammals, birds, reptiles, and eggs. They have evolved to be resistant to snake venom. That also provided us with our diet. Thank you very much, a 2-in-1. Finally, there's the last mon on the route, Seviper. It sharpens its tail on rocks, and Seviper wraps around its opponents to make them unable to move. Its tail and fangs are venomous and are used for striking and poisoning prey or enemies. It has been bitter enemies with Zangoose for many generations. It lives in grasslands and savannas, and in new Pokemon Snap, it can be seen attempting to prey on Octillery, which, I'm sorry? I mean, yes, I guess sea snakes exist, but the whole idea that a land-based snake going into the water to duke it out with something with 8 arms is kind of wild. I mean, it is 0 arms versus 8 arms, and yes, I get it, I know. There are more factors that go into this, but if I see some weird analog horror monster with 30 arms facing me from a completely different habitat, I am not attempting to go even remotely near that thing or even think about it as a potential source of food. Clearly, Survivor is brave and will eat anything that has meat and moves. So, let's paint a picture here. In the water, our fish Pokemon live as per usual, taking the rare chance at a Surskit when given. The Marill continue to catch fish as they bob their tails in the water as a lure, and Geodude continue to rest on the sandy shores. Moving from shore to shore, we do have the Lotad who might occasionally ferry a Seedot along the water, but this makes them easier targets for predators in the area, especially as Lotad struggles to stay healthy outside of the water. Seeking delicious and nutritious leafy greens, Swablu soars above, waiting for its time to strike. Any unfortunate souls crossing the river simply do not make it. As such, we don't find them on the water often enough to encounter them. As the Swablu grow in numbers to the point of having the highest population count in the area, it creates a pressure on both Lotad and Seedot, causing them to evolve. Now evolved to Lombre, it can stay out of the water much longer and seek out smaller puddles or ponds for refuge. Meanwhile, the newly evolved Nuzleaf has earned some combat prowess and can avoid combat if it needs to, or even defend itself just a little bit better as it becomes one with the forest. When the Swablu rest or nest, they are not safe, for nearby is another pair of strong predators that actually dine on the same meals. Swablu and their eggs are often in danger of both Zangoose and Seviper, as they too are in need of a meal. It's too bad that since they seek the same foodstuffs, they had become bitter rivals over time due to the competition between each other, and anytime a fight breaks out, the loser becomes the next hearty meal. Meteor Falls. This waterfall is said to have been the site of a meteor shower. An ancient people once made their home here. Yeah, Draconids, yeah, I've talked about them 100 times at this point in a number of different videos. So if you want to know a bit more about the history of Hoenn, go check out my legendary mythical Pokemon tree video. What's most interesting here is that this isn't much of an ecosystem. Yeah, we have Zubat, Goldeen, Magikarp, and 2 new Pokemon that were discovered after the meteors crashed upon this land, giving us even more Pokemon from space, Lunatone and Solrock. They are both known as the Meteorite Pokemon. For Lunatone, it states Lunatone lives in caves and becomes active under a full moon. The moon increases its power, and its health is tied to the lunar phases. Using its psychic powers, Lunatone floats through the air. It was first discovered at the site of a meteor crash. There's a theory that Lunatone may have originated from outer space, which, yeah, it all kind of lines up pretty well. And similarly enough for Solrock, Solrock relies on solar energy, which it absorbs in groups during daylight. While it is always expressionless, it is able to sense the emotions and thoughts of others. It spins its body to produce intense heat and blinding light. It is able to stay silent while floating in the air and can be found in caves as well. It is believed to have also originated from space, more specifically the sun, considering its abilities. So if they can be assumed to absorb light, then why are they here in the cave? Simple. They crashed here thousands of years ago. It's basically just their home, their spawning ground of sorts. So it is kind of built into their DNA to return here or live here, as it is kind of built into their species, kind of most familiar to them. They can produce eggs, and as with many other Pokemon, I don't really want to know how. But I will be finding out anyway, as I have a special video talking all about Pokemon eggs coming your way at the end of this month. At least that's the plan. Moving on though, as this isn't a super special place in terms of ecology, though it is kind of fun to think that maybe these Pokemon just take refuge in their craters, all snug and happy from time to time. We aren't going to delve any deeper here and move on to Route 115. This trail to Rustboro City was broken by people who lived at Meteor Falls long ago. At first glance, this is a strange little place. Tentacle, Wingull, Pelipper, Magikarp, and Whalmer, all we have seen before. Then we added Jigglypuff for some reason, a decent population of Swablu at the second highest here, with Tailo at the top with the highest population, which leads to the 10% chance of a Swellow appearing. Swellow's wings taper to a sharp point. An impressive dive bomber, it will never miss its target. Additionally, it takes great pride in its glossy plumage and often cleans the wings of other Swellow. It searches for warm meadows while in the air. Swellow preys on Wurmple. Okay, so that's cool and all, but there are no Wurmple here. Even later generations don't have Wurmple inserted into this area, and swallows don't even eat fish. The real-life bird just eats a tremendous amount of insects. So, for realism, and the fact that Swellow can move pretty far, they are near water, and there are a ton of them, this is going to be their nesting grounds. All of the other Pokemon here are simply existing as they normally do, while the Tailo and Swellow population booms in this area and travels throughout Hoenn. This is a great place for them to have water, raise young, and then travel away from throughout the region and return to if they need to. Very safe areas. So while there isn't a picture to paint here, at least we know where these bad boys come from. Also, forgot to mention that there is always a chance that since Whalmer are baleen whales, they might accidentally eat some of the birds coming down to the water for food. Oops. They just, kind of open their mouth, and if it falls in, it falls in. Not really trying to eat any of the Wingull, or, if we're looking at the real-life whales, it just kind of happens. Route 116, a path that many workers take on their daily commute between Rustboro City and Rust Turf Tunnel. Poochyena and Zigzagoon are back amongst Tailo and Abra. To add in, we have Skitty the Tree Kitty to talk about. Now, I will say, it is a cat, meaning that it should be an obligate carnivore. It's just what cats are. In battle, Skitty's tail puffs out as it threatens opponents with a sharp growl. It is fascinated by moving objects and chases them. It is known to chase its own tail and become dizzy from it. Although it can be difficult to earn its trust, it is very popular due to its adorable looks and behavior. Once again, we have attributed the moniker of Huge to a creature that is inherently deadly. But I mean, look at Skitty. Can you not agree with that? And they do live in holes in trees within forests. Now, while I could not find any cats, felines that nest within trees, cats will use trees to their advantage, climb up them, and ambush prey from above, which is very fitting if you already live in them. And if you're ever walking through a natural reserve where big cats might exist, keep your eyes open and not just looking around you or down to ensure you're not stepping on snakes or anything else, but also look up, because that is where they will be hiding. And if for some reason you hear the scream of a lady, that might not be a lady. That very well might be a bobcat, and you should consider turning around and going back home. Leave it to the professionals. Up next, we have Nincada. The claws are used to carve into the roots of trees and absorb moisture and nutrients. Nincada builds underground nests at the roots of trees in tropical and temperate forests. It can occasionally live up to 10 years underground. It does not like sunlight, avoiding it wherever it can, and is nearly blind due to living almost entirely underground. It uses its antennae to see instead. So while Skitty may take to living in trees and Nincada are eating those trees as cicada do. By the way, when taking college courses, we asked if cicadas will actually end up ruining a forest or destroying trees completely when they eat through the roots, and our instructor said, no, they just kind of eat, rise out of the ground, mate, and then die. I then hear, very close next to me, one of my classmates go, yeah, that's the life, and I laughed so hard I had eyes looking at me. But yeah, no worries. Basically, Nincada isn't really making much of an impact here and just gets to peacefully exist. Realistically speaking, when you encounter a Nincada, you're likely encountering it right before it's going to evolve, even though it is only level 6 or 7. I understand. But since Pokemon, in terms of bug Pokemon, are just bugs and could evolve early, theoretically, that's where we're going to sit. I mean, after all, there are many Pokédex entries that do state that a Pokemon will evolve once it reaches certain requirements, not when it actually fought and leveled up or reached a certain level or anything along those lines. That would kind of be a fun video. All the Pokemon that don't evolve by level. Could be interesting. The last friend that I absolutely adore here, and you can see as a little plush right over there next to Ed, if I can point properly, is my little boombox, otherwise known as Whismur. Whismur are a timid species, being easily frightened by loud noises, which means it would probably be really upset with me. Whismur's murmurs are barely audible, but when it senses danger, it lets out an ear-splitting cry as loud as a jet plane taking off. The cry of a Whismur is about 100 decibels and can cause an all-day headache should anyone be near it. To put that into better perspective, other than just saying, oh, it's a jet plane, the average motorcycle is rated at about 100 decibels for how loud it is. Now imagine standing next to it. Startled by its own cries, it will cry then even louder. When it finally stops crying, it will fall asleep from exhaustion. It is babby. Because it breathes through its ear canals, it can cry continually. However, it will stop crying if its ear covers are shut. It lives. Can you guess where it lives? One of the best places it could ever live. No, it lives in caves, which is just terrible because those cries are then constantly echoing when they scream. In all seriousness though, I absolutely do love Whismur and they're just too cute to pass up. Can't necessarily say about its evolutions, but X-Cloud is really cool. As for the ecology here, though, it is really odd. Nincada are new, but non-contenders. They are a treat for Tailo to eat, since I suppose they do appear often enough and in the same encounter rates, and Skitty would really be the only new one who makes a difference, but it's very rare to encounter here. It'll likely eat Zigzagoon and Whismur given the chance, but this may also mean that it's not their primary food source, and it is simply resting here. Especially as I'm positive Poochyena would definitely try to eat the Skitty. I will also say any tree holes produced by Skitty would make perfect little rest spots for the Tailo, but as not full nests. Rust Turf Tunnel. Nothing but Whismur here. I mean literally nothing but Whismur here, unless we look at Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire and see Geodude, because it doesn't even have actual ear holes that we know of at the very least. So it is the only one that can actually survive in this place without being deafened or bleeding from the ears. Like, you don't just realize how tortured Whismur is by itself until you start to look into things further and realize the sick joke played on this Pokemon within these games. Route 117, a path where many trainers gather to raise their Pokemon and train them for battle. Blah blah blah, throw up the same Pokemon we've seen before: Oddish, Marill, Poochyena, Zigzagoon, Seedot, Surskit, Goldeen, and Magikarp, but bugs and a rose by any other name have appeared. Starting with Roselia, which, yeah, appeared first here without Badoo or Roserade to back it up. It is a leaf skirt with a yellow stripe running down the front. A male will have a shorter leaf than a female. Whoa! Luckily, we don't have human bits down there. But it does hold a rose in each of its hands, a red one in its right, a blue one on its left. However, it is said that it will occasionally have unusually colored flowers. That could be the shiny, that could just be other roses. It can be kind of cool to see, like, all the different, like, blue rose, white rose, black rose, all that good stuff. Roselia's aroma brings serenity, but the thorns on its head contain a vicious poison. The more healthy it is, the more pleasant its flower's aroma. It shoots sharp thorns at anything that tries to steal its flowers, and uses different poisons in each hand when it attacks. It lives in grassy areas where it drinks nutrient-rich spring water, and its thorns are used as part of an old tradition, challenging an opponent to a duel by sending these thorns. So that does make it very interesting, because we have plenty of Oddish here, which will also travel far at night to find nutrient-rich soil. And this is the only place where we can catch Roselia amongst the other two Pokemon I have not named yet. And we also have the Daycare, Verdant Turf, which is kept pretty clean due to wind patterns, and Mauville, which is a leader in clean energy. I wanted to consider that they were potentially creating sludge, and we could, since they are on the water. So, What they might be doing here, and why we might find Roselia here, is because of the following. Mauville is using hydroelectricity, wind power, and solar together to create something as green as possible, fully self-sustainable. Which, yes, that is how you do it. There is no singular solution. College studies are slowly coming out here, baby. But, honestly speaking, that sludge that is created is whatever is left behind after burning up gray water. So, any water used by the city itself becomes gray water. You filter it, clean it, send it back to the water source, and you have black sludge left behind as a byproduct of this process. This black sludge can be incinerated for more energy, or it can be used as a sort of fertilizer, assuming all the harmful chemicals have been truly neutralized, which is also part of this process early on with separation. Can you tell I wanted to do this for a living? Also, it can also be broken down to rainwater and urban water, depending on your sewage systems, so that could make it even easier. Now, that sludge could be spread around, which is why we would find Oddish and Roselia here, because they love this area and the nutrients that are being deposited by this sludge. It's a clean area with a clean water source and has plenty of fertilizer and nutrients. Perfect for our plant Pokemon. Now, let's turn towards our other two Pokemon present as we stare at another pair of twins. Why do we have so many pairs, twin Pokemon? Oh, right, double battles were introduced in Generation 3. That's why this is happening. Anywho, here are Volbeat and Illumis, our Firefly Pokemon. With Volbeat, it is attracted by the sweet aroma given off by Illumis. It lives in forests near clean ponds, but will move if the pond becomes dirty. Then there's Illumis, because that's incredibly short. It uses its sweet aromas to lure in Volbeats and have them draw geometric patterns in the sky. It is said to earn respect from others by composing designs that are more complex. Over 200 different patterns have been discovered. It is a nocturnal Pokemon that lives in forests. That's truly it on the surface, but it is said that they will move their nests if the water sources nearby are dirty, so it makes sense that they would be here where they are the cleanest. I will also note Firefly populations are a bit rough, mainly because of light pollution being a thing, but, you know, if you don't know what that is, allow me to take a tangent here and actually explain how Fireflies choose a mate. They literally just go for the brightest one. If the brightest one is attractive to them, they go to that. Easy, nice, done. Out in the country, no issue. They flash, 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 and you are swooned. Problem. What if the brightest thing is not a Firefly? What if the brightest thing is in fact a car? A light. Lights from houses, lights from anything else you could think of. Well, they're not going to be super attracted to that. In addition, now this is off the noggin here, they are fairly sensitive as well. So they will end up turning their lights off, knowing that maybe now is not the right time. Which means that never may be the right time. Meaning that they don't mate and reproduce. So, you know, a little bit of a problem. Now, Fireflies do eat each other, nectar, pollen, or nothing at all according to the National Wildlife Federation. And, yeah, there are quite a few bugs that, when they become adults, they either subsist on the fat they obtained while in larval form to survive for the next 2 weeks before they kick the bucket, or they will have something to eat. One or the other. But that brings us to another interesting point, is that in the area where there is a Pokemon with incredibly sweet nectar is also the only place where we find the 2 Firefly Pokemon that would drink nectar or pollen to live. So this area goes on without any real depth of word paintings, but you can imagine the consistent, not fighting actually, but potential cooperation between Firefly and Roselia, because Roselia specifically stated as long as they are not stealing its roses. That means Roselia is depending upon our Fireflies here to actually pollinate and help them reproduce. And there's no other Pokemon that help do that with each other within Hoenn even. Route 118. This seaside route brings together the east and west sides of the Hoenn region. Time to add a little bit of competition and evolution to the mix. We can go fly about in the sky, pecking away at our usual fishy friends. Though one of those fish just might try to bite back with a ravenous appetite for flesh, as Carvana takes the stage. And yes, I know I'm breaking the rules just a little bit. The highest level here is 27, while Carvana is between 10 and 30. It's fine. You know, I actually realized probably no one's actually complaining. You just get a longer video with more detail, which you all eat up way better than a shorter video for some reason. It has powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth that are able to chew through solid steel, rip up boat holes, and rip wooden boats to pieces. As a result, sailors avoid getting their boats dented by it at all costs. Carvana has been responsible for the destruction of many boats that come into contact with it. They mercilessly swarm any intruder and prey that invades their territory, but they become timid when alone. It only attacks when in a group of 5 or more, becoming instantly vicious. Carvana is drawn towards the scent of blood. It lives in rivers that course through jungles as well as temperate regions, and each Carvana school has its own territory as they compete with Basculin for food. So its diet is fairly clear, but how about we wipe away a bunch of misconceptions about piranhas like we did with hyenas? According to Sea Life Aquarium, they primarily feed on a diet consisting of fish, smaller aquatic animals, and occasionally carrion, dead animals. Contrary to popular belief, piranhas do not typically attack humans unless they feel threatened or are in a state of extreme hunger. Heck, apparently there are dishes of piranhas, and the only time they really destroy their prey is when there's a full-on feeding frenzy. But it's exactly that. It's a frenzy. They're probably hunting, or rather hurting, for food and getting desperate. So they lose their minds and go nuts whenever something actually does appear in front of them. In the rare case that they have attacked humans, they focus on soft tissues like fingers or toes. So, I mean, I still wouldn't dip any of my ligaments into the same water as them, but they're not nearly as terrifying as they are made out to be. You should probably fear a moose way more than piranha, in my personal opinion. Not scientific opinion, but personal opinion. Back outside the water, though, we have Zigzagoon and Electrike, and this time, the Zigzagoon is not doing so hot. They exist in roughly the same population, but Electrike is subsisting on our raccoon, creating a pressured environment in which this Zigzagoon, having been hunted over and over and over again, will eventually evolve into Lanoon if it survives. So, let's recap info on the Lanoon since we did briefly talk about them earlier. Lanoon can run up to 60 miles per hour, but it can only run in a straight line, and has to stop before it makes a turn. Because of this behavior, it often fails to catch prey and struggles on roads that are curving or winding. When it sees prey underwater in ponds, it leaps in and uses its razor-sharp claws to catch and take it down. Lanoon's fur is strong and supple, and the shed hairs are used to make high-quality shaving brushes. As shown in Pokemon the series, Ruby and Sapphire episode Showdown at Lanoon, gotta love these pun titles, Lanoon has an attraction to anything round and will grab any orb-shaped object it sees if given the chance. It often carries a snatched object in its expandable cheek pouches and deposits it in any of a number of secret stashes it keeps on its territory. It also tends to live in grasslands. So from zigzags to straight lines, this Pokemon really puts itself at disadvantage when anything smarter than your average bear comes along. Its diet stays the same as previously stated, is just kind of everything. So that means, in turn, Lanoon starts to get revenge on Electrike, turning the tables and putting the pressure back onto this little baby wolf. This results in Manectric flashing onto the scene after being hunted too many times and the evolution occurring. And, who would have guessed, both Manectric and Lanoon have the same encounter rate here. They're kind of rivals in this area to some capacity, growing because their families are threatened. Manectric, to speak about them, gathers electricity in its mane and then discharges it. This process creates thunderclouds which it uses in battle. Since lightning falls in its vicinity, it is said to have been born from lightning, even though it wasn't, and makes its nest where lightning has struck. It lives in grasslands and savannas and rarely appears in front of people. Hate to break it to Lanoon, but I don't think it's faster than a lightning bolt. Not by a long shot. So, the wolf gets its meal fairly easily. Though, hiding in plain sight, we do have another. Invisible unless you take a closer look or maybe bump into it, we find Kecleon. Kecleon is able to change the colors of its body at will and is known for frequently using its ability to camouflage itself. However, it is unable to change the color of its red stripe. Its color also changes based on its mood and health, darkening in color with better health. By using camouflage to appear almost invisible, it can sneak up on prey and ensnare it with its long pink tongue. If unnoticed for too long, though, it pouts and may never reveal itself. And it lives in tropical and temperate forests. But like, can you just imagine playing hide and seek and then getting angry when you're too good at hiding to be found? The 1% chance of finding this Pokemon is probably not because they have low population here or anywhere else that you would find them. It's probably because they simply cannot be found. I mean, I guess it could be a mix though if you want to argue that, but either way, our Kecleon here is a non-contender in this area specifically. Small note before we go to the next route, I am confident that Manectric is also eating plenty of fish and even striking down birds from the sky to eat them. I cannot explain the number of times my dog has stared at the sky as geese flew by or anything else, or even tried to chase a finch, just hoping to catch one. It's a new day of recording for me, and I thought that I'd be able to grab a red shirt. Turns out I don't have a red shirt. I can't be Magma at all. I'm stuck on the open waters. But let's step away from that and actually step into the fact that we're going into Route 119. If you are not prepared for it, the harsh conditions of this tropical rainforest will defeat you in less than 5 minutes. That's a bit intimidating, but it isn't necessarily wrong. On land, we have Oddish, Zigzagoon, Lanoon, Kecleon, and the banana dinosaur itself, Tropius. It uses its neck for reaching treetops to gorge on its most favored fruit. Since it ate only this kind of fruit continuously, the fruit began to grow around its neck. These yellow banana-like fruits can be picked and consumed by other Pokemon or humans and grow twice a year because of the rapid production of sugar in Tropius's leaves. Its feet have toenails the same color as its fruit, and in warm areas there are ranches that raise Tropius. In Alola, its fruit is especially sweet compared to those of the other regions, and it lives in tropical jungles. In the TCG trading card game, it has been shown existing before the time when fossil Pokemon went extinct. In other words, Tropius is prehistoric. Now, I would love to see Tropius with other fruits on its body. It is a tropical Pokemon. Put on some star fruit, put on some coconuts, put on some dragon fruit even. It would be kind of cool to see, can't deny it. Meanwhile, in the water, in this like little stream that's going by, we do have Tentacool, Wingull, Pelipper, Magikarp, Carvanha, and Feebas in very specific spots, technically. Feebas is famous for its shabby appearance and is considered the shabbiest Pokemon. Just keep insulting it, my gosh. Due to its poor appearance, it is largely ignored by predators, trainers, and researchers alike. However, this hardy Pokemon is capable of eating anything and living anywhere. It is often found in oceans and weed-choked ponds, even if only a little water is available. While there are many of these Pokemon in existence, populations tend to cluster in small areas. Once found, its dull wits make it easy to capture. Feebas is a source of research due to its vitality despite it being unattractive and unpopular. Ah, yes, here's these wonderful qualities that you have. You have incredible survivability. You have a social structure considering you group together and stay together. Let's just not research you anyway because you're freaking ugly. That's a great way of going about science. There are even those who love to collect Feebas and only it, and reportedly are disappointed by its evolution into melodic. In the Pokemon Journeys, the series episode, the cuteness quotient, prism scales are revealed to form naturally on Feebas on occasion, which would explain how they're able to naturally evolve or how they are found in the world. I wonder if you can use prism scales to then identify previous populations that have existed within the Pokemon world, but then you wouldn't have prism scales in Kanto Johto unless maybe we look at Heart Gold, Soul Silver. So now I'm getting curious. What were past populations of Pokemon throughout the Pokemon world? Where did they used to live? What regions did they used to exist in? Can you use the items and everything like that to identify these areas like you would in real life? Let's take a small tangent because I just thought of it and I think it's really cool and I want to share it with you. So, what people are able to do when there are trees and there's like, say there's a lake right in the middle of all the trees let off their pollen, right? Well, the pollen will land on the water, it'll sink to the bottom, and then it'll get buried with sediment. What people are able to do is then dig through the layers of sediment and actually analyze them, looking at the pollen and then identify what trees or whatever plants, whatever was there years and years and years ago. And I think that's pretty cool. Now, back to Feebas. It is the ugly duckling of Pokemon, and let me tell you, the real story of that gets pretty sad along the way, and at least until you hit the end. And even then, it doesn't, honestly, for me, it doesn't make me feel good at all. It's like Rudolph. Hey, kid, you got a terrible looking nose. You're not useful or important to us, or even accepted into society, unless we say you are as a tool. Can you pull my sled tonight? While Feebas is capable of eating anything, it is likely not fighting anything, as it is just a bottom feeder or opportunistic omnivore, eating whatever comes its way that it doesn't have to fight. And we do know, based on other Pokédex entries, that Feebas is not bothered by other Pokemon, such as the territorial Crawdaunt, which will throw every single other fish or other Pokemon out of its water, except for Feebas. So it has to find a way to live somehow. It's going to be a bottom feeder. It is basically Magikarp, but female, but not female, you know? You know, when I think about it, I'm far more scared of Melodic than I am Gyarados, and that might primarily be because, at least with Gyarados, I know it's going to hit hard. With Melodic, it might make me hit myself hard, and that's scary, because it means I will never be able to get within an inch of this Pokemon before I get blown up. And because, yes, this is another area that is very special, that I know you guys really wanted me to try and paint a picture of, I shall give that to you. Humid. A stickiness that makes the air nearly graspable within your fingers. We sit within the jungle. A river courses through the area, serving as the only respite from the heat, as you can't even sweat. Within those waters, Magikarp and Feebas roam, picking at the scraps of every other Pokemon. They may even incidentally be eating each other or their own kind, as there are plenty of predators to take advantage of this stream. Tentacool freely float through the area towards their next destination, grabbing a fish as though it were just a fast food order. Carvana swim rapidly with or against the current as they move in swarms, striking down everything they come across. And if that weren't enough, the Wingull and Pelipper above have plenty of meals to choose from as they look to the waters below, even being able to scoop up some of the Carvana with little to no issue, sealing their fate within their massive mouth. From time to time, though, the Wingull and Pelipper take a break from the water and may roost in the trees below. There, they see some other potential meals. Zigzagoon scurrying about, seeking berries, maybe some oddish along the way too if it feels like eating the herbaceous little friend. But the greedy Pelipper makes its way in and scoops up the small Pokemon, taking it to never be seen again. With enough events like this, the Zigzagoon begin to fight back, and in equal numbers, we find the Lanoon. All of them staying in packs to lower the chances of being taken away by the feathery friend and protecting the Zigzagoon as well. The rare Kecleon does unfortunately get eaten by predators here, but if everyone plays nice, then blending in with the trees, we find our living banana tree Tropius. It lives its life happily and freely, eating its abundance of its favorite fruits as they grow plentiful in this forest where the conditions are just right. The fruits it grows may shed and not only feed the Pokemon here, but revitalize the soil for better nutrients and spread seeds to ensure the healthy regrowth and rejuvenation of the forest as time continues into infinity. This might be my favorite ecosystem here. Everyone plays a strong part. There's the sheer amount of Pokemon that are interacting with each other and even spreading seeds ensures that this jungle will grow plentiful and healthy. And I think that's what really makes a full ecosystem. They are truly interacting with not only each other, but the environment. Route 120. Pokemon that can camouflage themselves hide in the rich wilds along this route. So, yeah, nothing crazy here. Oddish, Morel, Poochyena, Zigzagoon, Seedot, Surskins, Kecleon, Goldeen, Magikarp, Barboach. Oh, I'm sorry. We have enough pressure being put back from Lanoon onto Poochyena because it keeps being hunted, or at least its Zigzagoon keeps being hunted, that we finally get one of my absolute favorite Pokemon that has its own emote on this channel, Hyena. Ignore the squeak of the chair. Now, we know the diet and everything already, but let's still read out Hyena's entry for anything special we might want to discuss. Hyena gives obvious signals when it is about to attack as it starts to growl deeply and flattens its body. Hyena travels and lives as a pack in the wild, consisting of around 10 individuals. Once a hyena targets a prey, it will never allow it to escape. The pack chases prey and defeats foes with perfectly coordinated teamwork. The pack can also howl in unison to send information to allies from far away. Their pack follows a strict hierarchy and will always follow the orders of their leader. This instinct also compels hyena to obey only the most experienced of trainers. As depicted in the movie Zoroark, Master of Illusions, hyena is prone to licking the faces of the people it's fond of. This species lives in grasslands and savannas. In the lentil region, hyena preys on furret. Pokemon, mwah, you did it again! You actually understood real-life hyenas and gave hyena the strength, intelligence, social understanding, and cooperativeness that it truly deserves, and that is also beautiful. But, yeah, nobody on this route is actually safe from hyena, except for Oddish and Seedot, because they're not going to be eaten by this Pokemon, though there is another that may be safe purely by power alone. The Pokemon of Omens, Absol. It walks with a pacing gait like that of a bear. They live in mountains far from civilization, and it rarely ventures down from its alpine home. Using its horn, Absol is able to sense even subtle changes in the sky and land to predict when a disaster will occur, and will try to warn people when one is approaching. Absol is also known to protect fields from natural disasters. This is often seen as the unfortunate effect of being blamed for these disasters, notably by the elderly. The hatred for Absol was started years ago by superstitions surrounding it. Despite this, others are interested in its ability to predict said disasters, and Absol has been referred to as a bringer of doom, unfortunately. They can move as swiftly as the wind and are said to have a lifespan of up to 100 years. As mentioned in the sleep style decks, the powers of Absol's horn remains active even when it sleeps. Due to this, Absol can strongly detect danger even when it's not awake. You know, we got the Hisu and Zoroark, mini-series. Give me a mini-series about Absol. Give me a mini-series about this Pokemon that is seen as such an omen, and it has not gotten its due diligence just yet. Unless one exists by the time I put this out, in which case, everyone can make fun of me. So, Absol is a small anomaly in the ecosystem. It has its horn, it has its claws, it very much has the ability to fight, it has cat-like and dog-like features, and is based on some creatures of myth. But the only clue we get is that this Pokemon, straight out, hates to fight unless it absolutely has no choice but to do so. We also know this primarily because of its Mega form. So, why is Absol here? Its diet would be that of an herbivore. The claws and horn could be used to scrape bark or dig up roots, so that's not a big deal. But why is it here? Well, when we look a little closer at the surrounding environment, we find the ancient tomb, where Registeel was sealed away by humanity. So, that seems like a good enough reason to stick around just in case Registeel wakes up and Absol needs to warn everybody of the impending potential disaster. Route 121. This road leads to both the Safari Zone and Mount Pyre. Many people set out along this route from Lily Cove City. Now, I looked at what we have here, and I may have audibly reacted to going, whoa, because what we have here is a little bit strange, and is one of the only routes where we really have ghost Pokemon. Now, we have Oddish Gloom with it being actually an insectivore, potentially opportunistic carnivore despite its Rafflesia designs or origins. We do have Poochyena, Mariana, Zigzagoon, Lanoon, Wingull, Pelipper, Kecleon, and then when we look at the water, we do see 3 water Pokemon, Tentacool, Magikarp, and Wailmer. But on this route, we find 2 ghost Pokemon. The adorable Teru Bozu, known as Shuppet, does come first. The horn on its head collects the negative emotions of people on which this Pokemon feeds. There goes its diet. The emotions it feeds on include anger, jealousy, resentment, and malice. So, some people are grateful for its presence. This also helps Shuppet become slowly stronger. A nocturnal Pokemon, Shuppet will appear in swarms beneath the eaves of houses with negative people. As such, there exists a proverb that says, "Shun the house where Shuppet gather in the growing dusk." It is most commonly found in cities and other urban settings, and will retreat to the nest in which it lives when the sun rises. It has a nest, that just clicked in my head. As mentioned in the sleep style decks, a Shuppet sleeping near the sleeping person will eat up their dark feelings. As a result, the person will wake up in the morning with their mood improved. So, a 2-in-1 bit here is that it says to stay away from houses where they gather. That basically means there's a lot of negativity, fighting, whatever else you might say, that might be in that household. But, at the same time, they are not inherently malicious. Shuppet are not. They would probably be phenomenal, oh my goodness, for someone with a lot of anxiety or depression, as it eats up those negative feelings and just, you'll feel better. I honestly kind of wonder if you could put them near a serial killer and actually remove those malicious thoughts from them and emotions before they would do anything horrible. Unless they're sociopathic, and then, you know, the emotion part of that doesn't matter, they're just gonna do it anyway. So, it eats emotions and isn't really eating anything or being eaten by anything while residing on a route between Lily Cove City and the Safari Zone. I kind of refuse to believe the Pokemon in the Safari Zone are sad, as they are supposedly supposed to be treated really well, but there is the chance. The next Pokemon, though, is the little Duskull, which is also right behind me. If I could just point, if I could just move my head, this is really, it's way harder. There we go, I got it. Now, it's called the Requiem Pokemon, and I can't stop with the JoJo's references. I haven't watched anything since Stone Ocean ended. I don't know why it's stuck in my head. It's over for me, y'all. Duskull can become invisible, sneaking up on their prey and going through walls. Duskull is primarily a nocturnal Pokemon and has been shown to live in thick forests. Once it chooses a target, it will doggedly pursue the intended victim until the break of dawn. It has been described as enjoying the crying of children. Just, why do I imagine a Duskull slowly floating up to a child and kicking it in the shin? That's terrible. And it is said Duskull will spirit away disobedient children. This is, though, often said just to make children behave. Its diet consists of the vital energy of children, my gosh, and all victims of Duskull tend to suffer an intense chill after being drained of their life force. So, on one hand, we have a ghost Pokemon that eats emotions and feelings, mainly the negative ones, and then on the other hand, we have a ghost that straight up eats the spiritual life of children. That is never really clarified much throughout the Pokemon series, to my knowledge. I mean, there's obviously visuals that happen that we see in the show, but is it renewable? Is spiritual energy renewable? Do you die on the spot? Do you just lose years off the end of your life? Well, we don't really know. We probably will never truly know. Though, the presence of these two Pokemon could also mean they are taking from Pokemon in the area as well, considering they have, or they are, tied together in terms of their population count on this route. That has to mean that Duskull is just waiting for eggs to hatch, and then is taking spiritual life from newborn Pokemon. It's terrible. As for the ecology of this route, Gloom isn't really making much of an impact unless Kecleon, Zigzagoon, and Wingull like bad-smelling stuff, and it catches them on occasion, and the others just kind of get to exist as per usual. Route 122. People make their way to Mount Pyre over this water route, relieving many precious memories as they traverse it. A lot of these waters, I will say, are just going to have the same Pokemon, discluding Feebas and Barboach, since Feebas can only be found in very specific fishing spots within their specific routes, specifically the one route that we talked about them in, while Barboach needs muddier waters or deeper, muddier waters, whatever it is, they need to be able to get to the bottom of it. The ocean or the sea is not that place for them. Though, we just barely can include the bully of the water, if I break my level rule again, as we get to talk about Sharpedo. Also, I realized something. None of my thumbnails accurately show how the hunting exists on any of these routes. Houndoom never interacts with any Pokemon in the wild in Johto. Tyranitar theoretically could run into a Sandshrew, but is never seen anywhere as a natural spawn. And Arbok and Pikachu don't appear in the same areas in the wild, I think, in any game whatsoever. And maybe one day I'll actively, consciously choose 2 Pokemon that actually are predator and prey, but I kind of doubt it. A lot of the ones that are available aren't that interesting. So let's just put that away and get back to Sharpedo. Sharpedo swallows and shoots out jets of seawater from its rear, which it uses to swim 75 to 80 miles per hour. However, it is unable to swim long distances. It's got butt water, and it's not the only creature to ever do this. I'm not talking about Pokemon. There are aquatic insects and I think some fish that actually can do this. It is feared and known by many names, such as the Bully of the Sea, Ruffian of the Seas, Bandit of the Sea, and Gangster of the Sea, as a group due to its sharp teeth. Sharpedo uses the teeth to finish off its opponent, and it was once prized for its dorsal fin as a food item and has been a victim of overfishing, just as real sharks have been. Like, they would literally catch a shark, cut the fins off, and throw the shark back in, which is terrible. Absolutely worse. Just, I hate to say it, just kill the poor thing. At that point, you're just making it suffer. And even then, that's still overfishing, and I don't know. It's bad. Its fangs can rip through iron and steel, being able to tear apart a super tanker to pieces. I'll be honest, there are some Pokemon in this world out there that if they existed in real life, humanity would have just nuked them out of existence permanently. Sharpedo is clearly incredibly vital to the waters though, despite its incredible danger, as it keeps what must be an insurmountably high population of fish in check, considering half of the freaking region is just water, which means half of the region is just fish. So that would honestly be a pretty terrible idea to actually try and make them go extinct, yet I have a feeling real life humanity would try that at some point anyway. Sharpedo's fangs can instantly grow back the moment it comes off. Discarded Sharpedo fangs are made into accessories due to the belief that they can prevent ship mishaps. It will attack any of the ships that enter its territorial waters without any exceptions whatsoever, and they are very sensitive to the sense of blood. They live in the sea, are known to prey on whalmer, particularly small ones, and also preys on other water-type Pokemon such as Finian, Luminian, Lanturns, and even Squirtle for that matter. In Alola, they're used as ride Pokemon called the Sharpedo Jet, and the natives use Sharpedo to move faster in the water and destroy rocks in the water. Gotta love the idea of taking an incredibly dangerous creature and turning it into your pet. Oh wait, that's all of Pokemon! So yeah, it's not hard to see how Sharpedo fits into the world here, and how it is basically it's our reset button of the water. You cannot just have everything living infinitely, because if you do, then disease will run rampant when things don't die, or when things are not eaten. Route 123, this route offers a convenient path back to Mauville City from Mount Pyre, but be aware that this is a one-way road. This is the same exact, or has the same exact population as Route 121. Mind you, when I was doing my research, I thought I went crazy, I went insane, and I mixed things up. I did not. It is the same exact thing. We are moving on to 124. This great stretch of ocean connects the cities of Lilycove, Mossdeep, and Sutopolis. On the surface, we have nothing new. But when we dive under the water, we get 3 new friends. Chinchou, the little football anglerfish that eats other Pokemon that I've talked about in the Johto ecology, followed up by Clamperl and Relicanth. With Clamperl, the pearls produced by this Pokemon amplify psychic power and can be blue in color, as seen in the Pokemon the series Ruby and Sapphire episode, Clamperl of Wisdom. Spoink's pearls come from Clamperl. These pearls are also 10 times more valuable than pearls produced by Shelder, so they are not the same Pokemon, it turns out, or even related. It is carnivorous, clamping down on prey without letting go until it stops moving. When it is close to evolution, Clamperl would become too big to fit inside its shell, and is the only Pokemon that gains extra effects by holding a Deep Sea Tooth or Deep Sea Scale. Clamperl has been observed being carried by Drifblim, its natural predator. Every time I read it, it confuses me more and more. It drives me legitimately crazy. Yeah, it's a carnivore. Yeah, it's a filter feeder. Yes, I know I ranted about this all before. Clam Pearl is theoretically not the orb in the center, as it produces those and can be taken by Spoink. It produces them. It gets taken away. It continues to live. Clam Pearl continues to exist. So Clam Pearl is not the actual pearl. Then we have Drifblim taking these Pokemon away from underwater that we have to dive in to get, even though they aren't even in this region. I know I just cannot ignore that. Then at some point this pearl that is theoretically just an eel egg transforms into Huntail or Gorbis that somehow this clam... Hold on. I got it. Hear me out. The clam is a catalyst. So, many aquatic creatures just kind of let out their eggs and their seed into the water and say, that was a job well done. And potentially, hundreds or thousands of their kind are born. Huntail and Gorbis are 50% male or female. So is Clam Pearl. But I think that is all irrelevant, as Clam Pearl is basically the gestator of their children, the surrogate mother or father, the seahorse of eels and clams for interspecies relationships. Simply put, Clam Pearl is filter feeding. Then one day, oops, I'm pregnant! And because it ended up filtering in the seed and egg from these eels somehow. Even then, though, it doesn't completely explain how the pearl gets bigger and bigger and then doesn't fit anymore. Eggs don't get bigger. I don't get it. This whole Pokemon is a headache and an anomaly, and that's about as close as I can get. That's genuinely as close as I could get. And, I mean, I guess it can make some sense as to why Drifblim takes it away if we consider Drifblim might eat eggs. Bit of a stretch, but honestly, all of this is just trying to regain some level of sanity within my brain. It's cool if we think about the filter feeding egg and seed aspect, but it's also painful and I'm ready to move on. Actually, I'm not ready to move on. I take that as a back because I want to seal the deal, because BBC Wildlife Magazine says male and female eels release sperm and eggs into the water for external fertilization, and the larvae spend years traveling back across the Atlantic to enter European rivers. It kind of feels good to have that answered after a number of months, wondering, how to even resolve it. But even now, I still don't feel like I have it fully resolved. And I don't think there's any stronger of a conclusion we're going to get than that. On to Relicanth, though. The composition of its scales, along with its fatty body and oil-filled swim bladders, allow it to withstand the intense pressure of the ocean depths. Well, Relicanth once had teeth, but they have long since atrophied. As such, Relicanth is a filter feeder, feeding on microscopic organisms that it sucks up with its toothless mouth. It has remained unchanged for 100 million years and stays as such because it is already a perfect life form. Aww, that's so cute. The Pokédex, which is usually mean to Pokemon, called Relicanth a perfect life form. It was discovered during a deep-sea expedition, and its name comes from an explorer whose name served as a variation of it. I've covered these bad boys in detail in addition to their real-life counterpart in my fossils video, and as we look at the real-life version, we get the following from NOAA Fisheries. The coelacanth is a slow drift hunter and eats a variety of benthic and epibenthic prey, such as cephalopods, eels, cuttlefish, and deep water fish. Gotta admit, cuttlefish, just as a side note, is one of my favorite underwater creatures. What's yours? Just a nice little simple question to put out there. This, though, it's probably the most appropriate video to talk about until I cover all water-type Pokemon in their own video. Yay. So, take it as you will, Relicanth is truly just a filter feeder as opposed to its real-life counterparts. Maybe it's getting eaten by Clam Pearl and Chinchou and whatever small fish Pokemon make their way over and get caught by those two. Route 125. Small children are allowed to play in the waters of this sea route as far as Shoal Cave, but no further. Nothing new here. Though, if we look at Shoal Cave, this cave's appearance changes greatly between high tide and low tide. Within it, we find Zubat, Golbat, Magikarp, Tentacool, Wailmer, and Spheal. When it is happy or cheerful, such as when eating in a group, Spheal will clap its fins. The meal times of Spheal have been described as noisy as a result. Because its body is poorly shaped for swimming and can only walk slowly, it moves primarily by rolling across ice floes. This Pokemon lives in and around the sea. It also lives on any drift ice that comes near the shore in order to avoid predators. Spheal are often juggled by its evolved form Celio, which does so to check the former's health. When a Spheal finds prey while drifting at sea, it will inform the Walrein leader of its herd on where to find the prey. As mentioned in the Sleep Solid decks, it can be seen clapping its fins merrily while asleep on its back. It has led to those being curious about what happy things Spheal is dreaming about once it awakens. It's literally just how your average Spheal is going to act, but I mean, Spheal is kind of a lot happier. Now, on the outside, I think it'd be really cute to see, oh, it's clapping its fins, oh, it's so great. But if you're a prey and you're being dragged back to not only just one Spheal or multiple of the Spheal with whatever the middle evolution is, I already forgot it. Celio, there it is, right there. I always forget that one for some reason, the Wilford Brimley of Pokemon. And then Walrein, you are terrified. You have an entire coliseum of Pokemon of the same exact type that are your predator, stronger and stronger, clapping their hands as you are the meal brought to die. That is not, that is awful. But it's nature, baby. Now, Seal might eat Tentacool, but it feels very unlikely. Otherwise, it's happily eating anything else that it can here, excluding Wailmer. I will say it is odd that we have this icy shoal here in such a tropical area. How did this get here? Why is it here? What legendary stopped by is the real question, and now we have permafrost in tropical lands. Or did it just rise out of the water? We do get a lot of different areas where it talks about how the water levels were different long ago. So maybe this is just the last bits melting away, and or maybe the inside of the cave is still cold enough, but the outside is basically gone. Now, the Zubat here are definitely a bit more pressured by the cold and the presence of an ice type, so it isn't surprising that that extra pressure ends up causing it to evolve due to that environment. In addition to the fact that it is kind of getting far out on the water now, and it has to fly further for its food, so it's using those wings more, and it's getting stronger, again, resulting in the evolution of Golbat, which that one might eat the seal if it could get through the thick blubber. I hope you're ready for the next couple of routes, because we're going to go by quick. Route 126. Even a pro swimmer would need 3 entire days to circuit around the crater containing Sootopolis City. Literally nothing new here again, other than the fact that there's a massive crash site here from a massive meteor, so that's cool at least. Route 127, though. With no place to stop and rest in these waters, it is very hard for a swimmer to make it across this route. Same fish, different route, lots of Wailmer and Magikarp, though. Then we get to 128. The ocean floor beneath this water route is rumored to contain an undiscovered ruin, and finally we get something new once more. Because we have all the usual suspects with Sharpedo and Carvanha within the open and clean waters that we have here, but now we add in Corsola, which nobody is really gonna bother, and Lovedisc. Lovedisc lives in shallow tropical warm seas, where it makes its nest in the branches of Corsola or coral reefs. I will take a side tangent here. Larvae make up coral, building them up. Coral is a living creature, and they will migrate. That is something that is overlooked very often, even as someone who tries to read and be educated and all this stuff. It is something that I have personally forgotten, and now you are aware of it if you weren't before, and at least you have been reminded of it. It is a living creature, and yes, we knew that, but the fact that it migrates as well, the fact that it moves and tries to find a more permanent land to live in is crazy to me. It probably explains why Corsola itself kind of just teeter-totters. Like, okay, Because I couldn't be satisfied with saying what I said, I looked into marine discoveries. They basically state that there are things such as corallimorphs. Corallimorphs are related to sea anemones. They do have tentacles that they will use to grab or trap food in, and then there's mucus that covers their bodies, and they use as a symbiotic algae like most corals. Now, they can move, and I will read it directly. They can do this in two ways. They can detach themselves from the substrate, float around in the water column, and resettle when they find a better, more appealing spot on the reef. Now, this is a great plan when they are in a controlled space such as a saltwater aquarium, where, honestly, all spots are going to be good. But on the reef, where potential currents may pick them up and take them off completely, it's not such a good move. Plus, if they get turned upside down, they are dead, so that's also not great. The other way they can do this is by simply crawling. They inflate and deflate their tissue with the water and can crawl along the substrate until they find a perfect position. It is a very slow process, but can be beneficial in other ways. Again, going back to Corsola teeter-tottering, walking along the bottom. Now, this wasn't supposed to be about Corsola, so how about we get back to Lovedisk here. During the breeding season of Lovedisk, it forms groups that turn the ocean's surface bright pink. As shown in Lovedisk is a many splendored thing. When two Lovedisk kiss, they are able to use their slender bodies as wings in order to fly for short periods of time. If a Lovedisk is left alone, it becomes disheartened and open to attacks from predators such as Pelipper. They are called the rendezvous Pokemon, so they just keep coming back to each other. Kind of cute, honestly. In addition to the whole idea of them coming together and kissing to then just fly away. Lovedisk is seen as a symbol of love and romance. Loving couples gave this Pokemon its name after spotting it in the ocean waters. It is said that any couple who sees a Lovedisk will be blessed with eternal love. Thus, honeymoon hotels usually release this Pokemon into their pools. A tradition in some places is to gift a Lovedisk to a person that person loves. At one point in the past, Lovedisk was also overfished due to the rumor that its scales would allow one to find their sweetheart. I can just imagine. The whole giggle there was just me imagining hotel staff waiting with a bucket full of Lovedisk, and they're just waiting for a couple to walk on in, and they're like, not yet, not yet, not yet, no! And they just pull a lever right after that to then release hundreds of Lovedisk all at once. Just to the point where it's a crime against nature. Now, Lovedisk is based on the discus fish, and we are going to cover their diet from the Myrtle Beach discus, which is named after the discus fish, who would have guessed. In the dark, murky waters of the Amazon, wild discus fish typically feed on small worms, crustaceans, plant matter, insects, and detritus that gets flushed out of the surrounding forests by rainfall. Perfect for our tropical region of Hoenn, actually. This also means that our poor Lovedisk is a Pokemon that definitely sits firmly near the bottom of the food chain and is being eaten a lot. Route 129. Many Pokemon trainers visit this route to train their Pokemon before challenging the Pokemon lead. And finally, after all these routes, after all these water Pokemon repeating over and over again, we finally get Wailord! Wailord is one of the largest Pokemon to have been discovered. Due to its immense size, it can make giant splashes by jumping out of the water, then crashing back down. These shockwaves allow Wailord to knock out its opponents and herd its prey. Wailord is able to eat large quantities at one time, such as schools of Wishiwashi. However, it will flee from Wishiwashi when it is in its school form. Yeah, I'd honestly be scared too if all of my food decided to gang up on me, gather together, and form a creature nearly as large as I am. Just imagine your popcorn doing that, or your chips. Really turns the tides, doesn't it? Wailord has an easygoing temperament and loves to play. Its size causes it to have almost no natural enemies. Its only known predator is Dhelmise. Wailord lives in the sea in large groups called pods, and these pods, which often include Wailmer, travel together in order to search for food. When a Wailmer is attacked by its predators, Sharpedo or Dhelmise, its whole pod works to defend it. Wailord can dive deep at 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters in one breath. Which, all this is pretty much what we've talked about previously when we talked about Wailmer and the orcas that Oof. Whalelord is popular due to its size. As a result, whalelord watching is a favorite sightseeing activity in various parts of the world. However, whalelord are known to be driven away by fishermen when they become too numerous, so they don't steal the fish that they are trying to catch. So I mean, everything here is on the dinner plate except for when Sharpedo does come in. Otherwise, these two get their picks of meals between Tentacle, Magikarp, and any unfortunate Wingull or Pelipper, mainly because they actually don't talk about the microscopic organisms. They just yum. Route 130. This route was once a big topic of conversation due to the strange island that seemed to appear and then disappear. We lose Whalelord, oh my goodness, as these waters are far too shallow. But on land, we gain Wynots of all things. It tends to live in caves and travels in herds. I don't know how it got here unless they built a raft of each other and then anything that tried to hit it got reflected away. Never mind, I guess it is possible. It will test its endurance by squeezing up against other Wynots at night. In doing so, it strengthens itself, toughens its spirit, and learns to launch powerful counterattacks. When angered, it will slap the ground with its tail. As it loves to eat sweet fruit, it is also drawn to fruit gardens. As mentioned in its sleep decks, it maintains its smile even while sleeping. Slapping the ground with its black tail is a possible sign that Wynot is feeling restless and angry in its sleep. So you're telling me that just like the cave that Whismer in, if I stand right outside of this cave that they are in, I'm just gonna hear an endless amount of noise every night. Except this time, it's a bunch of smacking as these mini punch bags just keep slamming repeatedly into each other like the worst Newton's cradle. They also eat fruit, so I mean, that makes it nice and easy in terms of their diet. I don't think anything is going to try and eat them, which could be why nothing else is on this island. They may have caused every other predator to go extinct that tried to hit them. Route 131. It is the custom in Pacific Log Town to swim a lap around this route before breakfast. No new Pokemon. Look, I'm gonna be real. We're gonna just shoot past 132 and 133. 134 adds in the vulnerable Horsey, which just eats insects and moss, so it becomes food for predators, and we're just gonna keep moving on because I'm actually gonna say it. I'm actually gonna, there's too much water here. We need maybe one or two more water Pokemon. Maybe one or two more water Pokemon, man. I don't know. Either way. Before we get into the final portion, I want to briefly cover Sky Pillar, even though it is man-made, arguably by the Draconids. Now, created by the Draconids, it tells the story of the super ancient trio that we talked about before. While the three provided water, heat in the form of a magma core, and an atmosphere allowing life to be created upon the earth, Kyogre and Groudon caused immense destruction only whenever they would meet. Rayquaza being needed to put a halt to it, and then restoring balance through its control of the atmosphere from all the heat and water being introduced into it. That is how that trio interacts with the world, and again, if you want to hear it on a much deeper level, if you somehow haven't, go check out my deep dive on the legendary and mythical family tree and how they are connected. It's a long one, so take it in parts. There are chapter markers. Sky Pillar itself does host a slew of Pokemon, but they're all very much just not interacting with each other. Claydol eats nothing and just exists. Mawile and Sableye are back, meaning they eat what they can. Golbat is somehow here, just likely as a roosting spot. Banette exists, but also eats nothing as it is already full of energy. And finally, Dusclops is here, which eats anything and everything it can absorb into it. The only one left sits at the top floor, being Altaria, and its diet from Swablu has not changed, though it really does love water. Makes sense for a songbird. Like, if we really want to break this down, and maybe I'll do a video on the most important man-made structures in Pokemon, this one would be, actually, I'm going to do this off the noggin, so get ready for this and how I speculate. Right off the top, we have all these Pokemon that are more ancient. We have Golbat that isn't, and just a big Pokemon that can find refuge here. Meanwhile, Mawile and Sableye are making their way here. Mawile, unknown reasons why, it's eating what it can. Maybe it is trying to eat some of the other Pokemon here. Meanwhile, Sableye is harvesting from whatever is left behind, whatever treasures have left behind from the ancient civilization. Claydol is likely there because it was part of that ancient civilization, as we kind of talked about when we talked about, what is the Pokemon? It's pre-evolution. Not Claydol, whatever, the tippy top guy. Anywho, now, with that, the only other Pokemon here that we can talk about, as like when we look at our last three, Dusclops, again, another one that doesn't make sense as to why it's here. It's just kind of here. Maybe it's cleanup crew. Maybe it's just what has been left behind. Meanwhile, when we look at Banette, again, something left behind. Dolls, toys. There were children as a part of this. So they were left behind, and the Banette, brought to life by their grudge, don't actually understand why they were left behind. And at the top of it all, we do have Altaria, which sings the song of the people long past, being an ancient Pokemon itself, as when we looked at its Mega Evolution, you could go check out a video on that, but when we look at its Mega Evolution, it regains all of its previous abilities that it used to have, now having its fairy typing, and also now singing an even more beautiful song than it would before, happy at its now restored form. So, Sky Pillar is super important and tells a story through its Pokemon without even having to tell you that the Draconids were here. You know that there was a civilization here. You know that somebody built this, and you know those people are, assumedly, supposed to be gone. I really didn't want to ignore it because it is such a vital part of history, but it would also be a section that would bog things down way more and unnecessarily if I went too deep into it. And like I said, maybe I can save that for a video on the most important structures within the Pokemon world. And how about we put that to a close and move on to our finale, Victory Road. This challenging path forces trainers who hope to overcome the Pokemon League to first surpass their own limits. Floor by floor, let's knock this out and paint a nice picture at the end. Meaning, unlike all the other routes, I'll save why these Pokemon are here and how they affect each other until after we've explained to everybody and actually paint that picture. Floor 1, we have Zubat, Golbat, Whismur, Makuhita, Aeron, and 3 evolutions, Loudred being one of them. It is able to shout at high volumes by inhaling, then exhaling, using powerful stomach muscles. Additionally, its round ears serve as loudspeakers, and it will stomp its feet to build power. Its powerful voice can tip trucks, splinter wooden houses, and blow away its opponents. But it will be temporarily deaf when it finishes shouting. Loudred can be found in caves. I relate to Loudred a little too much in terms of the loud voice. I've actually hurt my ears a couple of times with yelling too loudly. I need to get I'm gonna put sound stuff here. Anywho, back to focus. Now, Loudred does have some pretty blunt teeth, so it may just be chowing down on some roots or sticking to the berries. Moving forward, we have Hariyama. Hariyama's body consists mostly of muscle instead of fat. When its body tenses, its muscles become as hard as stone. It likes to match power with other big-bodied Pokemon and can stomp the ground to build its own power. Trucks can be sent flying, telephone poles broken into, and trains can even be stopped by its powerful slapping arms. They are kind-hearted and practice etiquette, praising its battle opponents. As it grows older, it focuses more on training Makuhita. It lives in mountainous areas. It's kind of like, the Kingpin of Pokemon, from Marvel. Yeah, if you don't know, that's not fatty. That's all muscle, baby. Once again, I will make the claim that this Pokemon is not eating meat in the wild, but rather a good chunk of roots, potatoes, vegetables, and fruit. And potatoes, again, are incredibly good at helping with muscle growth. Up next is Lairon of our 3. It smashes its steely body against others when battling over territory, and shows off its strength with the size of sparks it creates by ramming into rocks. Close inspection of it has revealed scratches and dents left on the armor from its conflicts. It drinks nutritious mineral spring water and feeds on iron contained in rocks. However, it has gotten into conflict with humans over these territories in the past. It builds its nest on mountains where iron ore is buried, which results in it clashing with humans that are iron mining or other Lairon. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, Lairon sometimes falls asleep while eating iron ore. The reason is due to Lairon having strong desire to win in future territorial disputes. So basically, Aeron ate enough to shed its metal shell over and over again until it finally fully, quote-unquote, evolved into Lairon. Forward, we march onto floor 2, technically basement floor 1. Yes, I did get it right this time. Golbat, Hariyama, Mawile, Lairon, Geodude, and Graveler pretending to be rocks, and 2 new Pokemon, Metatite and Metachamp. Metatite heightens its inner energy and spiritual power through meditation, which also allows it to levitate. It trains hours a day and never skips its daily yoga training. Metatite's training never ends, since it constantly loses concentration and focus while meditating. It eats 1 berry per day as part of training, which tempers its spirit and makes its senses sharper. It lives and trains on the mountains. So, yes, it's training constantly, it only eats 1 berry a day, nice and easy, but what about Metachamp? Through the power of meditation and fasting, Metachamp has developed a 6th sense. It allows it to use psychokinetic powers and heightens its energy to enhance this 6th sense even further. It battles with elegant dance-like movements, which it uses to dodge attacks and launch devastating blows. The Pokemon in the series Diamond and Pearl episode, sliding into 7th, showed that it can sense aura. It only eats once per month, and it lives in fields and mountains. It will hide by using its powers to blend in with its surroundings. So, now it's down to 1 berry a month now. Really trying to cut back on the grocery bill so that way you can save money in the long run, aren't you? Bear with me, we are almost done, and then we can paint that beautiful picture for y'all, okay? So, we are finally on to the last one, being basement floor 2. Golbat, Sableye, Mawile, Lairon, Metachamp, Goldeen, Magikarp, Barbroach, and lastly, Whiscash. Whiscash uses its caudal fin to cause earthquakes that can extend for over 3 miles by hitting the bottom of swamp beds. Whiscash can predict when natural earthquakes will occur. It also uses these massive earthquakes to drive away any foes that come near it, going on rampages in the process. This behavior, along with sightings of Whiscash's leaping from lakes, has caused people to mistaken it for starting earthquakes. So again, it kind of goes back and forth. Does it cause an earthquake? Does it not? It has to move earthquakes, so it does cause earthquakes. But does it cause every earthquake? The answer is no. Done. Whiscash tends to wait silently for prey to come to it. This gluttonous fish will eat anything that is alive, sometimes whole, as shown in Pokemon the series Ruby and Sapphire episode, Whiscash and Ash, as it had tried to eat inanimate objects as well. Whiscash also has a diet of consuming mud, it has poor eyesight, and that causes it to use its whiskers to detect a prey's vibration. When you live in muck, why would you rely on your eyesight anyway? Also gotta love when they make it nice and easy on me. Whiscash eats everything! And literally everything. It's not just omnivorous, it's just literally everything. So, now that it has eaten it up, it's time for you to eat it up as we hit our final description for this installment of Regional Ecology. Stepping into Victory Road, heart thudding, breaths quickening, in a mix of excitement and healthy anxiety, we have a Makuhita. It knows that this cave is a challenging one where it can really hone its body to the next level. It is beset upon by Zubat that it learns to knock away, only for them to come back stronger as Golbats. These same Golbats get to feast gluttonously upon the Makuhita and Whismur, and no matter how loud the cries of the Whismur may be, they mean nothing to a Pokemon that can kill it fast enough. Struggling against this larger foe, both Whismur and Makuhita evolve into Loudred and Hariyama. While the Loudred can now direct its cries to blast away foes, this can cause rumblings within the cave, causing cataclysmic cascades of rock and earth to bury Pokemon here. The Hariyama just see this as another challenge, fighting against the cave itself and any Loudred brave enough to cross its path. Hariyama rushes through Victory Road and comes across groups of Aeron. Having not been this far before, it doesn't realize that it is happening across Lairon territory. Luckily, the Lairon may only occasionally attack out of concern of their home, maybe a display of territory even against each other, sending sparks flying within the darkness, lightening up the path as they go through, while other times they recognize that Hariyama is not here to harm it, its family, or its habitat, and simply allow it to pass on deeper into the cave as Lairon simply continues devouring iron ores. the crunching echoing along the way. In this lower floor, Hariyama bats away at the larger population of Golbat. This, though, is rather difficult, but the sumo wrestler does not back down from a fight. It simply uses its smelling salts as a way to stay standing and fights on. There are more Lairon here. A deeper area means more unearthed ore, after all, meaning more food for growing new shells and evolving. As Hariyama continues its path, it passes by a looming shadow, now smaller than it ever was before, but only because Hariyama has grown larger. It recognizes what is a Mawile and may challenge it. If it accepts, there is a struggle against the Steel Fairy as it nimbly dodges blows and strikes back with its well-toothed hair-like appendages. The match is called, and even as Hariyama walks away, a Golbat is snatched out of the air by Mawile for its next snack. Hariyama moves onward, further and deeper into the dark cave as it starts to notice meditating groups of Meditite leading the group. It finds Medicham practicing against Geodude and Graveler in the area, trying to take refuge from Lairon they may try to eat them. Hariyama takes a stance, Medicham takes its own, and they clash. A fierce battle erupting between them and the different styles they master, but unfortunately for Hariyama, it is defeated. Though, in honor, the Medicham cares for Hariyama and welcomes it to come back in the future for more sparring. So now, we follow Medicham into the last, deepest floor. Golbat are swiped from the air with ease. Sableye is avoided as it focuses on its gems. Mawile may occasionally be sparred with, and the Lairon leave Medicham alone as well. Instead, Medicham may take the time to meditate near the water when it can, isolated from all others. At least, it would like to believe so. Because within the water, the fish roam. Goldeen attempts to take territory as it strikes at Magikarp and Barboach, but unlucky for it, the Barboach have enough muck and food to bring about a much larger and stronger contender to the ring. The ground rumbles, the water toils, and Medicham stands up, backing away from the water slowly, keeping its eyes focused, its arms up, and its body tense, but loose enough, as it is ready to protect itself, all as the earthquake violently shakes the cavern, bringing danger to all who reside within it before bursting from the water is a Whiscash. It devours all that sits before it and returns to the bottom of the cave's water, waiting for its next unfortunate meal to fall prey to it rather than spending the energy to hunt down the food itself. And so, after noticing all this, we exit the darkness and emerge before the Elite Four. Steven awaits, champion in the making. So, that is our Hoenn ecology. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, let others know about the channel, share this video around, maybe go watch the other videos, and become a member if you want to go the extra mile, either on YouTube or Patreon, to support long and detailed analyses like this one for as little as $3 a month. It goes a very long way. Up next, we're gonna cover all of our grass type Pokemon and plant sentience, so get ready for that. Otherwise, thank you to all of our members that you are seeing on screen. Thank you once again for watching, and as always, don't do anything I wouldn't do, don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.